Chapter 47:24. Hemph, as expected of a brainless dog. Su Lingchong snorted coldly. Seeing that the other party was reaching out to grab his backpack, he immediately set up the laser cannon and fired without saying a word. The braided man was still sneering just a moment ago, but a laser flashed, and the next moment, his entire head evaporated into thin air. The scene was so strange and bloody that even Scarface, who was a mountain king who killed and set fires as if it was his daily routine, was dumbfounded. Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air and couldn't say a word for a long time. Even though Scarface was already fearful before, he definitely didn't think that this kid would be so terrifying. It seemed that he was not any weaker than the armored man. How could he know that this had nothing to do with strength? Even if it was just an ordinary child, as long as he knew how to operate the laser cannon, he could kill people like grass. Who else? Su Lingchong aimed the laser cannon at the crowd with an unfriendly expression. Immediately, the group of people were scared and ran away like rats. The scene was really chaotic. Seeing that Su Lingchong seemed to be staring at him, Scarface immediately broke out in a cold sweat. In a moment of desperation, he quickly jumped out and shouted, "You bunch of blind idiots, you even dare to provoke such a great expert. You deserve to die. Didn't I already tell you to treat these two masters well? Are your brains filled with sh*T? You can't even remember such an important thing." Finished speaking, Scarface turned his head with a flattering smile and cautiously said to Su Lingchong, "Young hero, you're a great person and don't hold grudges against these lowly people. It's all my fault for not disciplining them strictly, allowing these disappointing idiots to cause trouble for you. How about I find a place for you to rest your feet? I have top-notch spirit tea. Treat it as an apology." Scarface's change of expression stunned Su Lingchong. Since the other party took the initiative to admit defeat, he naturally wouldn't kill them. After all, the other party was a true early-stage profound ascension expert. Even if he had a powerful weapon like the laser cannon, he didn't have an intelligent armor to protect his body. Facing such a strong enemy, his heart still trembled. Otherwise, Su Lingchong wouldn't have been scared away by Huo, who was a nascent, soul-perfected expert. Now that he was able to scare Scarface, it was already the best result for him. "No need, I'm still in a hurry." Su Lingchong immediately refused. He was afraid that the other party would notice something, so he didn't dare to stay in such a place for long. After saying that, he directly dragged Kong Ming forward. Sure, please." Scarface hurriedly stepped aside. Even his subordinates consciously opened up a path for them. They respectfully watched as Su Lingchong and Scarface left. Su Lingchong dragged Kong Ming towards the teleportation formation without stopping. On the other hand, Huo was on the other side. He was also carrying the dying Lin Yi on his back, but he was very careful along the way. He had to be cautious with every step he took. He could only try his best to choose the path he took when he came, so as to reduce the risk as much as possible. However, in this way, her speed would be much slower. After all, she was not like Su Lingchong, who had a super-killing weapon like the laser cannon. If she encountered anything on the way, she could just blast it and be done with it. Along the way, if there was even the slightest sign of trouble, they would be alerted. Huo was trembling with fear as if she was treading on thin ice. She couldn't be blamed for being timid. The key was that Lin Yi's current state was too dangerous. He really couldn't stand any more tossing and turning. It only took Su Lingchong 5 days to drag Kong Ming to the exit of the canyon, but it took Huo 15 days. Whether it was the trial takers or the spirit beasts, they were all targets that she had to try her best to avoid. So she took a lot of detours on the way, and from time to time, she had to hide for a long time. Her speed was really not fast. 10 days had passed before this, and now it took another 15 days to return. So when Hu Yudi carried Lin Yi out of the 10,000 years Grand Canyon, it was already not far from the deadline of 1 month. At this time, most of the trial takers should have returned to West Island. The rest were either masters in the peak of the nascent soul realm who could stay for a few more days, or they had missed the deadline. Like Scarface's group, they were trapped here and couldn't get out. There was no third kind of people. Hui Yudi carried Lin Yi on her back and appeared at the exit of the canyon. In front of them was the oasis. At this time, Scarface's group still hadn't dispersed. Instead, his group of people had grown stronger. It turned out that at this moment, not only Scarface's original group of people, but also some trial takers who couldn't get out this time, were forced to choose to be under his command and become one of his men. In the crowd, Scarface said to one of his subordinates in the peak of the nascent soul realm, "Hanshin, you are now at the last bottleneck of the peak of the nascent soul realm. If you continue to stay here, you will follow in my footsteps and be completely trapped in this damn place. So you should take this opportunity to leave quickly. You have followed me for so long and done a lot of things for me. Even if you don't have any credit, you have worked hard. Take the things with you as a farewell gift from me." "Thank you, boss." The master in the peak of the nascent soul realm, called Hanshin, was grateful on the spot. "Well, all of you listen to me. As long as you follow my brothers, I will never let you suffer. Hanshin is your example." Scarface took the opportunity to win over everyone. Sure enough, everyone's mood suddenly rose, especially the new subordinates. They were originally dejected and disheartened, but after seeing this scene, they all cheered up. It had to be said that this Scarface was really good at winning people's hearts. With Han Chun as an example in front of them, everyone would only be more loyal to him. After all, as long as they followed him with peace of mind, even if they couldn't get out for the time being, when they reached the bottleneck of the peak of the nascent soul realm, they could go out like Han Chun. Only when there was hope would there be motivation. For everyone, there was no doubt that this was the best ending. So everyone was willing to follow him, and Scarface's method could be said to be tried and tested. Every trial could be replenished with a batch of fresh blood, so that his team continued to grow, becoming a real local bully here. Huiyuti looked at this scene from afar. She saw through Scarface's intentions at a glance. The reason why he wanted to send away his little brother, who had reached the bottleneck of the nascent soul realm, was not only to win over people's hearts, but the most important reason was that Scarface didn't want to see a second profound ascending stage master. In this place, he was the only profound ascending stage master. With his strength, he was naturally worthy of being the local tyrant. But if there was a second profound ascending stage master, then his position would not be stable. As the saying goes, one mountain cannot accommodate two tigers. It might be a situation of life and death. Sending people away could not only eliminate the threat, but also gain a good reputation. It had to be said that this Scarface was a rare smart person. To be continued. Boss, why did you? Han Chun felt dizzy from the slap. He looked at Scarface, feeling wronged and speechless. If you want to steal a woman, just say it. You're the boss. Do you think I dare to not let you have her? Do you have to hit me directly? Scarface rushed over and grabbed him by the collar. He gritted his teeth and said in a low voice, "You dare to touch this woman? If you want to court death, wait until you get out. I won't stop you, but don't drag me down with you. Isn't that ruthless man already dead? What's there to be afraid of?" Hanshin curled his lips disapprovingly. "Are you King stupid? Have you forgotten the lesson of the armored man? How many days has it been?" Scarface spat and said resentfully, "Didn't the armored man also fall down? But the person beside him is also a ruthless man that none of us can afford to offend. You see, this one is lying on the ground, but how do you know what kind of person she is? What if birds of a feather flock together, and she's also a ruthless man who hides his strength? Hearing Scarface's analysis, Han Chen broke out in a cold sweat. Thinking about it carefully, it did seem to make sense. He was almost blinded by lust and made a big mistake. People who are about to go out don't fail at the last moment. If you cause trouble at this time, I won't let you go. Scarface said sternly, Yes, yes. Boss, don't worry. I will definitely not cause trouble for you. Definitely not. Han Chen nodded repeatedly and promised. Under Hui Yuti's strange gaze, Scarface continued to lecture his little brother. After Scarface finished lecturing his little brother, he smiled apologetically and forced out a smile that he thought was friendly. Miss, are you preparing to go back? Hui Yuti nodded. Just now, although they spoke softly, she still heard it. So at this moment, her heart was at ease. She secretly laughed and was no longer nervous. Oh, do you want me to have someone send you? Scarface took the initiative to be attentive. No need. Hui Yuti said with a cold face, then ignored everyone and quickly left with Lin Yi on her back. After the oasis, the rest of the journey was a monotonous desert. Previously, she felt that it was extremely boring, but for Hui Yuti at this time, it couldn't be better. Because no matter how boring it was much better than being surrounded by danger. Not to mention that there was not much time left, and they couldn't afford to waste any more time. Time passed quickly. 3 days later, Hui Yuti finally arrived at the teleportation formation. At this time, there were already several trial takers waiting in line. Those who rushed to go out at this time were naturally masters at the peak of Yuanying Realm. When everyone saw Hui Yuti and the dying Lin Yi on her back, they didn't have much reaction except for being surprised. After all, there were 2 masters from West Island here to maintain order. If you wanted to make trouble in this place, you had to pay the price. What's more, Hui Yuti herself was also a master at the peak of Yuanying Realm. If they really fought to the death, they might not be able to gain any advantage. Even if they could, they would inevitably be seriously injured because of this, and they couldn't recover in a short time. Then they wouldn't even be able to go out. Hui Yuti carried Lin Yi on her back and quietly waited in line behind the crowd. After the people in front of her left one by one, Hui Yuti was about to step into the teleportation formation, but she was stopped by a master from West Island. Only one person can go in. If you take him, you can't go by yourself. The master from West Island explained, faintly. What? Hui Yuti was shocked when she heard that. Before the trial of West Island began, she vaguely heard Yen Xinlan mention this, but she didn't take it to heart at that time. She didn't expect that it would become a fatal obstacle now. This is decided by the teleportation formation. No one can change it. Even if you carry a dead person on your back, it doesn't matter. Only one person can go through at a time. Of course, there are no restrictions on the treasures of heaven and earth. The master from West Island looked at Hui Yuti with some sympathy. To be continued. Chapter 47:26. This woman worked so hard to carry the man who was obviously going to die back. She was really affectionate and loyal. If there was a way, they wouldn't mind making an exception for her. Unfortunately, this was not up to them. The teleportation formation was designed in this way. Even if the god of heaven came, it would be useless. Hui Yuti suddenly frowned. It was not easy to get back to this place. She thought that she could take Lin Yi back to West Island and save herself from danger, but she didn't expect to be stuck at this last step. What should she do? In any case, she couldn't go back alone. Leaving Lin Yi here alone was tantamount to asking him to die. But they couldn't leave together, So she was in a dilemma. Hey, are you going to leave or not? We are still waiting in line. While Hui Yudi was hesitating and in a dilemma, the people at the back of the line began to get impatient. They didn't care so much. They were in a hurry to go back. If it took too long and they couldn't go back, who could they blame? Then let me think about it. Hui Yudi had to step aside for a while and let the people at the back pass first. She found a clean place not far from the teleportation formation and settled Lin Yi down. Then she stayed by his side and frowned. Time passed little by little. Seeing that the trial testers who came back one after another were all teleported away, Hui Yudi was still at her wit's end and couldn't come up with a feasible plan. Because of the presence of the masters from West Island, she was saved from the trouble of being harassed by other trial testers. Even Han Chun, who coveted her beauty, didn't dare to look at her when he passed by. But this didn't solve the problem. No matter how carefree she was, what was the use of being trapped here and unable to get out 2 days later? It was a whole month. At this time, all the trial testers had left. Even those who stayed here knew that they couldn't leave, so they turned to the scarred man. At this moment, only Hui Yudi and Lin Yi were left beside the teleportation formation. This is the deadline. Are you going to leave or not? If you don't leave, you really can't get out. This man is obviously going to die. There's no need for you to stay here and die with him. It seemed that the two masters of West Island were also ready to leave. After looking at each other, as women, they couldn't bear to see her leave, so they came over and advised her softly. No, I won't leave him behind. I definitely won't. Hui Yudi shook her head firmly. There are plenty of fish in the sea, and there are plenty of good men in the world. Why do you have to hang yourself on a tree? One of the West Island masters sighed, helplessly. West Island was a feminist society, and it was not as particular as other places. It was simply unreasonable for a woman to commit suicide for a man who was obviously going to die. A woman would commit suicide for a man. That's right, little sister, you're a peak, nascent soul cultivator, right? Even if you go all out, the power you can muster will only be enough to activate the array formation now. It will be useless if you delay it for another day. You can only wait until the next trial begins. But you should be very clear about the situation in this place. As a girl, it's simply wishful thinking if you want to wait for the next trial test in peace. Those people will definitely target you. Another master from the West Island tried to persuade her. The existence of people like the scarred man was never a secret, but the top management of West Island never intended to deal with him. Instead, they were quite indulgent. To put it bluntly, since this was the trial place, people like the scarred man were like other monsters and beasts. They were all stepping stones for the trial takers, so they were allowed to do whatever they wanted. Hui Yudi still shook her head. Suddenly, she rolled her eyes and said, "Two sisters. If I make a move with all my strength and try to teleport him out first, I wonder if it will work?" This was the only way she could come up with after thinking about it for the past 2 days. Although she also knew that it might not be so easy in case it was really feasible. Anyway, there was no one else waiting in line now. She believed that the two masters of West Island should be able to give her a clear answer. In that case, you can't get out by yourself. Now it's been a month. If you want to start the transmission formation, you have to use your strongest move. You can't hold back at all. Only in this way can you barely succeed. In fact, even so, you may not be able to get out. This is not a joke. The master of West Island warned him in a stern voice. Yes, 1 month is the limit of a master in the peak of Yuanying realm. You can't have any more losses. Another master of West Island also shook his head and added, "Besides, if you want to put him into the transmission formation and stand outside to start the transmission, although it's not completely impossible, It's very difficult because the eye of the transmission formation is hidden inside. If there is no special move, you can't reach it from the outside at all. You have to think about it clearly. This, Huayuti gritted her teeth and thought for a while. No matter whether it would work or not, she should try her best to see if she could send Lin Yi out first. But in this way, no matter whether Lin Yi could be successfully transmitted out in the end or not, she would definitely not be able to get out. This was equivalent to using her own fate as a bet to fight for a chance for Lin Yi. As for the difficulty that the two masters of West Island said, Huayuti didn't take it too seriously. After all, she was a genius disciple of East Continent's Morning Pride Academy. She still had this kind of means. You'd better come with us. This kind of attempt is completely meaningless. No matter what, one of you has to stay. If you choose him, not to mention the fact that you may not succeed, even if you really succeed with his dying state, I guess he can't bear the burden of the transmission. And maybe he'll die even faster. Seeing that the time was almost up, the two masters of West Island finally persuaded her. Huayuti was suddenly shocked when she heard this. If they hadn't reminded her, she would have forgotten this point. The transmission process was a huge burden on the body. For cultivators, it naturally didn't matter in normal times, but in the current state of Lin Yi, what they said was really not an alarmist. Moreover, even if Lin Yi could get through it now, if there was no one to care about him when he arrived at West Island, even if there was only a little gap in the middle, there might be unexpected trouble. What if Kaisi and his helpers were waiting at the door of the transmission formation on the opposite side, waiting for a chance to kill him? In this way, it was too risky to send Lin Yi out alone, and obviously it was not a wise choice. But if Huayuti was asked to go alone, she would never agree. To be able to come into contact with this beautiful island lord who had always been high and mighty at such a close distance, all the trial takers felt genuinely flattered. Of course, even if they had some dirty thoughts in their hearts, they would never dare to show it in this place. Ning Shangling was like an empress in West Island. If anyone dared to blaspheme it, no matter how strong he was, he couldn't walk out of West Island alive. Behind the beautiful Ning Shangling was Ning Xuefei, who was as pure as a fairy, according to the rules. The princess of West Island could not easily show her face in public, but the trial of West Island this time was a little special, and it was related to her marriage. Her future husband was very likely to be among this group of trial takers, so it was reasonable for her to follow her mother to appease the crowd. As Ning Xuefei's best friends, Shanghai Laner and Han Jingjing naturally stayed by her side. At this time, the three women were not in the mood to watch the fun, and they frequently looked at the exit of the transmission formation. Han Jingjing had already told Ning Xuefei and Shanghai Laner that Lin Yi was seriously injured and in a coma. Although they knew that someone was taking care of him, they still couldn't help but worry and be nervous. If Ning Shangling hadn't forbidden them, the three of them would have run to the transmission formation to wait for him. If they could, they even wished they could be transmitted in. Time went by bit. Seeing that the trial takers hadn't come out for a long time, the three women couldn't help but become more and more anxious. Was there any problem? After all, the three of them had investigated the matter of the teleportation circle. While it wasn't entirely impossible to teleport an unconscious Lin Yi over, it was still an extremely difficult task. At this point in time, one could only imagine the price the enemy had to pay. There were two choices, either to keep herself or to keep Lin Yi. If it were the three of them, they would definitely sacrifice themselves to transmit Lin Yi out without hesitation. But the other party was just a strange woman whom they had just met. Would she do that? No one knew the answer, so they could only wait. However, under the expectation of the three women, Lin Yi's figure didn't appear for a long time. until the two guards of West Island came back. Lin Yi still didn't come out. Han Jingjing and Shanghai Laner looked at each other, and their faces suddenly became a little pale. Ning Xuefei almost fainted on the spot at this moment. This wasn't just related to Lin Yi's safety. It was also related to her marriage. She had practically pinned all her hopes on Lin Yi, and the blow she suffered at this moment was so heavy that she couldn't bear it. There's no one inside. At this moment, a woman suddenly rushed up and hurriedly asked the two guards of West Island, who had just walked out of the transmission formation. This person was the East Continent's Morning Pride Academy's vice headmaster, Lu Ziyu. As the leader of the East Continent Academy this time, Lu Ziyu's every action represented the East Continent Academy. So, she had always spoken appropriately and had never lost her composure as she did now. At this moment, her expression was extremely ugly, even more so than Ning Xuefei and the other two women. Because not only had Lin Yi not come out, her precious disciple, Hua Yudi, had also not come out. To her, Hua Yudi was not only the most important personal disciple, but in a sense, she was also like a mother and daughter. She had painstakingly brought her up from infancy, and this kind of relationship was far from that of an ordinary master-disciple relationship. The two guards of West Island were instantly shocked and took a closer look at Lu Ziyu. Knowing that she was a good friend of Island Master Ning Shangling, they didn't dare to slight her, and immediately replied respectfully, "There's a woman beside the transmission formation, and a man whose status is unknown. However, like the rest of the people, they probably won't be able to come out." Chapter 47:28. So that affectionate girl was actually Lu Ziyu's personal disciple. The two West Island guards instantly came to a realization, and then explained that girl could have come out herself, but in order to accompany the man whose life or death is unknown, she took the initiative to give up this opportunity. She has already made up her mind. The two of us tried to persuade her for a long time, but it was useless. What? Die? I would stay behind for a man? Lu Ziyu couldn't help but frown, his gaze sweeping across the crowd, finally landing on Ren Zhongyuan, Yi Xiaotian, and Yao Jieli. Lu Ziyu understood this precious disciple of his very well, although this girl was very powerful, and she wasn't young in terms of age. She had spent most of her time in seclusion training these past few years, and her temperament was even purer than some ordinary girls. In Morning Pride Academy, with Hua Yudi's status, ordinary disciples wouldn't dare to easily strike up a conversation with her. And among all the disciples of the academy who had come to the West Island this time, the only ones who could really talk to her were Ren Zhongyuan, and the other two, especially Ren Zhongyuan, who had been trying to pursue Hua Yudi all these years. If it was said that during this training, the relationship between the two of them had progressed, and Hua Yudi had chosen to stay behind for Ren Zhongyuan's sake, Lu Ziyu could more or less understand it. But now that Ren Zhongyuan had already returned, who would she be guarding? Lu Ziyu couldn't help but start to suspect. Could it be that the girl these two West Island guards were talking about was actually not his own disciple Hua Yudi, but someone else? You're saying that Sister Hua Yudi took the initiative to stay behind in order to take care of Brother Lin Yi? Han Jingjing suddenly came up at this moment and couldn't wait to confirm with the West Island guards. The two West Island guards, who had just come out, looked at each other. They were very familiar with Han Jingjing, who had lived here for a few years, and said with some uncertainty, "We also don't know if that man and woman are the Lin Yi and Hua Yudi you mentioned. We only know that the man's injuries are very serious, and there's a very large hole in his stomach. It looks like he won't be able to survive." "There's no mistake. That's Brother Lin," Han Jingjing confirmed, and then winked at Ning Xuefei and Shangguan Laner, who were anxious next to her. He gestured for them to relax a little, since Hua Yudi didn't hesitate to throw her life away, and insisted on staying inside to accompany Lin Yi It proved that Lin Yi wasn't dead yet. Otherwise, what was the point of her guarding inside? From Han Jingjing's point of view, as long as her big brother Lin Yi wasn't dead, then there must be a way to get out. This kind of thing definitely wouldn't be a problem for big brother Lin Yi. When Lu Ziyu heard Han Jingjing's words, she couldn't help but frown. Although she didn't know how Han Jingjing could be so sure, judging from her appearance, it was as if that woman was indeed his precious disciple. The fact that Hui Yudi was safe and sound made her heave a sigh of relief. It was just that her precious disciple had actually stayed behind for a man. Moreover, it was a man that she had never met before. This matter was truly strange. What? Brother Ling is heavily injured and won't be able to survive. How is this possible? Qi Wenhan, who was not far away, immediately turned pale with fright when he heard this. He and Xia Luoluo were not greedy for heavenly treasures, and this trial was more like an outing for the two of them. Therefore, after they had harvested something, they had left early. These past few days, they had been waiting to reunite with Lin Yi, but in the end, he received this grievous news. Qi Wenhan's vision darkened, and he nearly fainted. Fortunately, Xia Luoluo supported him from the side, and he barely managed to stabilize himself. Wenhan, don't be anxious. With Brother Ling's abilities, he might not necessarily die. Let's figure this out first. Xia Luoluo comforted softly. She had a good impression of Lin Yi, especially since he was Qi Wenhan's big backer. If something really happened this time, then the matter between her and Qi Wenhan would inevitably have another variable. At this moment, within the crowd, Ren Zhongyuan and the others were also paying close attention to the movement of the teleportation array. Especially Ren Zhongyuan. Like Lu Ziyu, he had always been anticipating Hui Yudi's figure, but unfortunately, the person he loved had not appeared even after a long time. Now, after hearing these words, Ren Zhongyuan's heart was instantly filled with mixed feelings. Lin Yi was about to die, and this was considered good news to him. Basically, any man who got close to Hui Yudi was someone who deserved to die in his eyes. However, the pure and clean goddess in his heart, Hui Yudi, was actually willing to risk her life to accompany this fellow who was about to die. How could Ren Zhongyuan, as her pursuer, endure this? At the same time, the expressions of the other two people in the crowd were somewhat complicated. These two people were the ones who had caused Lin Yi's fatal injuries, Su Lingchong and Kong Mingming. After these few days of recuperation, Kong Mingming had already completely recovered. After all, Lin Yi had only just grasped the power of lightning, and its power was really limited. Kong Mingming was only in a more miserable state when he was electrocuted. Relying on the tenacious vitality of a high-level cultivator, he was already able to move freely after a few days. Otherwise, he would not have been able to teleport back. Now that they heard the news that Lin Yi was about to die, Su Lingchong and Kong Mingming could not help but look at each other. In reality, from the way they saw it, Lin Yi was definitely going to die. No matter who it was, they would not be able to survive after having such a big hole in their stomach. Lin Yi was still able to struggle at death's door. It could only be said that this fellow's vitality was really terrifyingly tenacious. But even so, in their eyes, Lin Yi was already a dead man. Getting rid of such a sworn enemy was, of course, a great thing for them. But the problem was, how could they explain this to their superiors? Before this, because Su Lingchong was afraid of being blamed by his superiors, he did not dare to say it was so serious when he wrote the action report. He only briefly mentioned that they had injured Lin Yi, and that Lin Yi could not recover in a short period of time. He might not be able to come out for the time being, and it was estimated that he would be trapped in the trial ground for the next few years. When the mysterious man received his report, he saw that Lin Yi was only temporarily trapped, so he did not say much. But now this matter was exposed in public, and now everyone knew about it. This matter was about to be exposed. Headache. At this moment, Su Lingchong and Kong Mingming both had a headache and did not know what to say. Killing Lin Yi was already a violation of their superiors' strict orders, and now they had to add a felony of deceiving their superiors. When the mysterious man found out, he would definitely be furious. At that time, there might be a cruel and inhumane punishment. What should they do? On the other side, after hearing the conversation between the two guards of West Island and Han Jingjing, two powerful experts with cold auras also showed a shocked expression. These two were the top figures in the younger generation of North Island. One was Ram Jia, and the other was Lan Tiefu. Chapter 47:29. But in the eyes of these two people, whether it was Ram Jia or Lan Tiefu, there were some hidden meanings that people couldn't quite understand. They didn't feel pity for the death of Lin Yi, a genius junior, but there seemed to be some inexplicable solemnity in their eyes. Sent, except for these people, the rest of the people who heard the words more or less stirred up, but they didn't care about it. After all, whether it was Lin Yi or Hui Yudi, they had nothing to do with these people, and they didn't gather here for these two people. For them, it didn't matter whether Lin Yi died or not. They only cared about one thing, which was who could laugh to the end in this West Island trial and finally become the son-in-law of Ning Shangling, the island owner of West Island. Today was the objective deadline of the trial, and it was also the time to check the harvest of all the trial takers. If everything went well, it was likely that the result would be out within today. So Ning Shangling showed up in person. But now that everything had happened so suddenly, Ning Xuefei, who was the main character, had suffered a huge blow. Her face was pale, and she could not even stand properly. She had to rely on Han Jingjing and Shangguan Lan'er to support her to maintain her balance. As for Lu Ziyu, the leader of the East Continent Academy, who was an important guest, he also had a worried look on his face. He was obviously not in the right state. In this case, it was obviously not appropriate to continue to operate according to the original plan. Ning Shangling pondered for a moment and changed her mind. Then she ordered Yan Xinlan, the deputy island owner, to come forward and announce, "Everyone, please take out the trophies you got in this trial. We have special staff to register them. After that, you can go back and have a rest. We will choose a day to invite guests to judge. As for the specific follow-up, please go back and wait patiently for the news." Hearing this, everyone was suddenly disappointed. They all thought that the result would be out today, but they didn't expect that they still had to wait. For those trial takers who thought they had a chance to stand out, this waiting process was undoubtedly a kind of torture. However, since Yan Xinlan had already announced it in public, what was done could not be undone. It was useless for them to object. In fact, no one dared to object. At most, they just complained a little in private. When the disciples of West Island came to register their trophies, they left one after another. As soon as Su Lingchong and Kong Mingming returned to the room of the envoy's mansion in West Island, before they could sit down and take a breath, a bloody bat came to them. It carried the mysterious man's handwritten order. "Regarding Lin Yi's matter, you must give us an explanation. Otherwise, you'll have to bear the consequences." The tone of the handwritten letter was extremely harsh. This time, it didn't even use code words. It could be seen that the mysterious man was really angry. Looking at the fierce handwriting, Su Lingchong and Kong Mingming's eyelids twitched violently. Although it was just a sentence of "bear the consequences," which did not seem too scary at first glance, it was the mysterious man who said it. Behind these 4 words, their life and death were directly decided. Su Lingchong and Kong Mingming had no doubt that if they couldn't give a reasonable reason and explanation this time, they would definitely be in big trouble. It was even possible that they would die because of it. What should we do? Hurry up and think of a way. Su Lingchong's voice was harsh, and at the same time, he looked at Kong Mingming with an unkind look. If they couldn't find a decent reason, he was ready to take this guy as a scapegoat. Only in this way could he escape the disaster. Yes, Child Su, don't worry. There will be a way. There must be a way. Kong Mingming was so scared that he quivered in his heart. Although he didn't have any great wisdom, he was never short of petty cleverness, especially this kind of insidious and vicious thing. He was an expert. As soon as he saw Su Lingchong's eyes, he knew what this guy was thinking. You'd better come up with a way. Otherwise, if the higher-ups really investigate, one of us must die. It's up to you. Su Lingchong said coldly. Yes. Kong Mingming was so anxious that his forehead was full of sweat. Seeing that there was a hint of killing intent in the other party's eyes, he suddenly had a flash of inspiration and said, I got it, Child Su, I have an idea. What idea? Say it quickly. Su Lingchong urged hurriedly. Child Su, although Lin Yi's injury is very serious, he still hasn't died until now. This means that he most likely won't die. I know this guy very well. His vitality is very strong. In the past, this kind of situation happened several times, but he didn't die. It will definitely be the same this time. Besides, if he really can't make it, why is the girl still guarding him? Kong Mingming nervously licked his lips and analyzed carefully. This makes sense. Su Lingchong's eyes lit up when he heard that. As long as it proved that Lin Yi wouldn't die, the higher-ups should not be so persistent in this matter. Then, the two of them could also escape a disaster. Immediately, he nodded and said, Okay, I'll reply as you said. After the two of them sent out the letter, they stayed in the room and didn't go out, waiting for the mysterious person's reply anxiously. If they couldn't explain it in this way, they would really have to bear the consequences. After waiting for a long time in fear and trepidation, the two of them finally waited for the bloodbath. They couldn't wait to open the mysterious person's letter. There was only one sentence on it. For the sake of the Thunder Xian vine, don't do it again. Su Lingchong and Kong Mingming looked at each other, then let out a long sigh of turbid air, sat on the ground like a deflated ball, and didn't move for a long time. This time, they were really scared, but fortunately, they escaped a disaster. They were fine here, but on the other side, Ning Xuefei directly fainted after returning to the island owner's temporary imperial residence. She was under too much pressure. Even if Han Jingjing had comforted her in a low voice, it didn't help. Previously, she could still hold on the way, but after returning to the room, she only felt dizzy and immediately fainted. This scene really gave Ning Shangling a big fright. She hurriedly, carefully examined Ning Xuefei and found that there was nothing wrong with her body except a little fever. As long as she slept, she should get better. Only then did the island owner of West Island finally let out a sigh of relief. With her two best friends, Shanghai Laner and Han Jingjing, accompanying her, Ning Shangling had nothing to worry about. She immediately took her people out of the room. It was impossible for her to personally accompany Ning Xuefei. After all, as the island owner of West Island, there were still many things to do, such as comforting Lu Ziyu, who was also burning with anxiety. Staying at the bedside of Ning Xuefei, although Han Jingjing and Shanghai Laner were also very anxious, they were much better than Ning Xuefei. For them, as long as Lin Yi was alive, that was enough. Chapter 47:30. She would feel that it was her fault that Lin Yi fell into this situation. If it weren't for her, Lin Yi wouldn't have gone to participate in the trial of West Island at all, and he wouldn't have been seriously injured like this. If it weren't for this, Ning Xuefei wouldn't have fainted. No one would be able to bear such a big thing, let alone a simple little girl like her. Waiting on the side, Han Jingjing whispered a few words to Shanghai Laner. Then she took out her mobile phone and dialed a number. She couldn't help but feel a little nervous. She didn't know if she could still get through the phone. After she bought these 2 mobile phones, she installed solar charging panels. After all, in a place like Heaven Stage Island, there was basically no other way to charge it except solar energy. Although she didn't have to worry too much about the power problem, if the weather on the trial land was bad, and there was no sun for a long time, then it would be hard to say. Fortunately, after waiting for a while, the phone finally beeped, indicating that the phone was connected. Han Jingjing reluctantly breathed a sigh of relief. Looking at Han Jingjing's movements, Shanghai Laner, who was next to her, also pricked up her ears. Although she had learned about Lin Yi's condition from the 2 guards of West Island, both she and Han Jingjing wanted to confirm it with Hui Yudi in person. They waited patiently, but after a few seconds, Han Jingjing suddenly froze. What's wrong? Shanghai Laner thought that something had happened, so she quickly asked anxiously, she hung up on me, Han Jingjing said in a daze. Before she finished speaking, her mobile phone suddenly rang. She quickly picked it up and said, "Hello, is this Sister Hui Yudi? I'm Han Jingjing." "Oh, it's me." Hui Yudi's embarrassed voice came from the phone. It was a pure mistake, just now. She only knew how to make a phone call, but she didn't know how to answer the phone. She was so excited that she hung up the phone, so she could only call back quickly. "Sister Hua, how is Brother Lin Yi now?" Under the urgent gaze of Shanghai Laner, Han Jingjing didn't have time to chat. She asked quickly. "His aura and pulse are almost the same as before. Although it's very weak, he can still barely maintain it. However, I don't know how long he can last like this." Hui Yudi said worriedly. Lin Yi's current condition couldn't be said to be good. He could only be said to be hanging by a thread. If he was in the secular world, he would be in a state of critical illness at all times. If he could endure it, everything would be fine. But if there was even the slightest mishap, he would immediately die. "Sister Hua, remember one thing. To Big Brother Lin Yi, no change is the best news, so you must have faith in him." Han Jingjing encouraged her. "And I understand. Don't worry, I will take good care of him." Hui Yudi was obviously much calmer now. "Thank you, Big Sister Hua. If it weren't for you, we really wouldn't know what to do. It's all thanks to you accompanying Big Brother Lin Yi. You must take care of yourselves. We will wait for your safe return in West Island." Han Jingjing was sincerely grateful. Apart from other things, Hui Yudi was willing to stay in the trial ground for Lin Yi. This alone had already moved her very much. "Don't say that. I am willing to accompany him." Hui Yudi's voice suddenly became weak and inaudible. She didn't know why she suddenly had a feeling of a concubine meeting her legal wife at this time. Although she also knew that this thinking was very strange, she couldn't help thinking in this direction. She was even a little unable to extricate herself. The 2 talked for a few more words. In the end, she specially told Hui Yudi to take out her mobile phone to bask in the sun and charge it often. Only then did Han Jingjing hang up the phone and look at Laner next to her. They breathed a sigh of relief at the same time. "How is he?" At this time, Ning Xuefei suddenly woke up faintly. The first thing she said was to ask about Lin Yi's situation. "Fei, don't worry. Big Brother Lin Yi is fine. He is recovering on his own, and Sister Hui Yudi is next to him. There will be no problem." Han Jingjing comforted her. "Really? That's good, that's good." Ning Xuefei's face finally regained some color. After pausing for a moment, she suddenly reacted and asked, "Hui Yudi is Deputy Dean Lu's disciple, right? She seems to have rarely left the East Continent. How did she know Lin Yi?" Han Jingjing pouted and said, "I also don't know about this. Haven't I been with you for the past 2 years, Fei? As for what Big Brother Lin E has experienced, it was you guys who told me. That's not right. Little junior brother hasn't been to the East Continent for the past 2 years. I haven't heard him mention any girls at all. Shangguan Lan'er had the most say in this regard. After thinking for a while, her eyes suddenly lit up, and she said, Jing Jing, do you remember that before the trial began, there was a girl with a veil who wanted to strike up a conversation with junior brother? Was that Hui Yuri? It can't be. Big Brother Lin E clearly rejected her at that time. She was rejected in public. As a girl, she can't possibly go and pester Big Brother Lin E, right? Han Jingjing shook her head. Who knows? Maybe something happened after she went in. Shanghai Laner said thoughtfully. No matter what, she sacrificed herself to stay with Lin E and never left him. We have to find a way to thank her. Although Ning Xuefei was weak at the moment, when she said this, she had a kind of bearing. It seemed that she had unconsciously regarded herself as Lin Yi's woman. What are you thanking her for? Big sister, who doesn't need us to thank her. If you really want to repay her, let little junior brother devote himself to her. Shanghai Laner sneered. Ah, devote himself to her? Hearing this, Ning Xuefei and Han Jingjing were stunned. They were grateful, but they had never thought about this. You two are really stupid. Big sister Hua and little junior brother met by chance. If she didn't fall in love with little junior brother, why would she sacrifice herself to accompany him? She is a pure girl. If this kind of thing is spread out, her reputation will be ruined. Of course, only junior brother can be responsible for it. Shangguan Lan'er analyzed seriously. Ning Xuefei and Han Jingjing looked at each other and finally closed their mouths after a long time. This was a little unexpected. However, Shanghai Laner's analysis was not unreasonable. Otherwise, they really couldn't think of any other reasonable reasons. Fei Fei, Jing Jing, congratulations. You will soon have another sister. Shangguan Lan'er said with a mischievous smile. Chapter 47:31. Shanghai Laner suddenly blushed and couldn't speak. She wanted to deny it, but she didn't know why she was reluctant. Although she had never thought about this, she would never agree to marry another man without Lin E. Is there a better man than little junior brother in this world? Shangguan Lan'er seriously doubted it. Like Ning Xuefei, who didn't want to marry other men, she didn't want to be separated from her best friends. At this moment, she couldn't help but think shyly, my body has been seen by little junior brother. Does this mean that we're officially friends? Looking at Shanghai Laner's blushing face, Ning Xuefei and Han Jingjing suddenly laughed together. After all, they were all simple-minded girls. After such a scene, the previous gloomy clouds suddenly disappeared. The three women even began to discuss the problem of who was older and who was younger with great interest. On the other side, after Hui Yuri hung up the phone, she was not as carefree as the three of them. However, after listening to Han Jingjing's words of comfort, her heart finally felt a little more at ease. She no longer thought about it. She only wanted to protect Lin E by her side, looking forward to his gradual recovery. Lin E actually knew everything that Hui Yuri had done for him. Although he was seriously injured now, he couldn't even open his eyes, let alone speak. However, during the time when his injury was about to recover, he already had some consciousness, feeling the gentle breath of Hui Yuri close at hand. Lin E was extremely moved at this moment. What Hui Yuri had done had far exceeded the kindness of temporary teammates, let alone a union of interests. Even good friends who had known each other for decades might not be able to do this for her. After all, Hui Yuri did this, and she had sacrificed a lot. In order to accompany Lin E, she almost risked herself. She was simply risking her life to accompany him. She didn't even hesitate to risk her life let alone a girl's reputation and integrity. Although Linny was quite slow in the emotional aspect, he was not a fool. However, he wasn't a fool. At this moment, he finally understood that perhaps there were some unexplainable feelings between him and Huiyuri. In fact, they both knew why Huiyuri was willing to do this for him. After coming to Heavenly Island, he didn't want to provoke more love debts. This was really unfair to his confidants. Unfortunately, he was a genius in other aspects, but in the emotional aspect, he was really slow to the point that people didn't know what to say. Every time it happened, it was the girl who took the initiative, and Lin Yi himself was an extremely soft-hearted person. Getting him to put down his pride and reject her face was harder than ascending to the heavens. Especially in this case, Huiyuri was willing to give up her life and reputation for him. What else could he say? He was touched and helpless at the same time. He could only tell himself that in his heart, this time, no matter what, he couldn't let Huiyuri down. She had done so much for him, and as a man, if he still hesitated and backed down, that would be too unreasonable. As for now, there was only one thing that Lin Yi had to do, and that was to work hard to recover. Although most of the trial takers had already left, there was still Scarface and the others. Huiyuri alone couldn't stand firm in this trial ground. He had to recover as soon as possible so that he could rest easy. West Island Master Palace. In a side hall study, two women sat opposite each other. It was West Island Master Ning Shangling and East Continent Morning Pride Academy Deputy Dean Lu Ziyu. The study was the same as the boudoir. It was Ning Shangling's private place. Generally, outsiders couldn't come in, but Lu Ziyu and she were good friends who had known each other since childhood. Although there was a difference in strength, they weren't outsiders. Shangling, do you know who that Linny is? Lu Ziyu asked with a strange expression. She really couldn't imagine that her precious disciple would take the initiative to stay inside for a man she didn't know. At this moment, she felt an inexplicable emptiness in her heart, as if the flesh of her heart had been snatched away. This Lin Yi is indeed a very rare talent. Among the younger generation of the 5 great heavenly islands that have recently risen up, he can be considered a rare, outstanding talent. Ning Shangling smiled and said honestly, "To be honest with you, Ziyu, I actually think quite highly of this kid. He's one of the candidates that I'm interested in as Fei-Fei's husband." "This kid is really that famous?" Lu Ziyu instantly revealed a surprised expression when she heard that. Who was Ning Shangling? She was the West Island Master, a top-notch existence that could be counted on one's fingers even in the 5 great heavenly islands. With her level and status, ordinary so-called super geniuses wouldn't catch her eye at all. Even in a place like East State College where geniuses gathered, there were very few young disciples that Ning Shangling could remember, let alone get such a high evaluation from her. At least from what Lu Ziyu knew, this old friend of hers had never evaluated a young man like that. To be able to make her a candidate for her daughter's husband, he was equivalent to half an heir of the West Island in the future. Was this Lin Yi really that amazing? He can't really be considered famous. In terms of fame, he's actually far inferior to Nakajima and the few from the East Continent. However, if you carefully understand what he's done, you'll know that he's extraordinary. Ning Shangling was rather emotional. Seeing that Lu Ziyu didn't seem to believe her, she smiled and gave an example. "You also know that the West Mountain Evil sect is a great threat to our West Island. All these years, I've spent a lot of manpower and effort to monitor their every move. Among them, there's a West Mountain Old Sect Master. You still remember him? Of course, he's a loser." Lu Ziyu sneered. She was a reliable ally that naturally stood on the West Island's side. Whenever the West Mountain Evil sect wanted to stir up trouble, she would rush over to help at the first instant. She had quite a few encounters with the top-notch experts of the West Mountain Evil Sect, and among them was the West Mountain Old Sect Master, who was ranked second among the evil cultivators. To you, he's naturally a loser, but even at the level of the mountain opening period, this old thief's strength is still considered a rare, troublesome existence, Ning Shangling said. This old thief is indeed not weak. Last time, I even suffered a small loss at his hands, Lu Ziyu said angrily. Although she suffered a loss last time because someone caught her off guard and made the first move, this West Mountain Old Sect Master was indeed not a kind person. Even if the two of them fought one-on-one fairly, to be honest, she didn't have much confidence that she could win. Chapter 4732. Kill who? Lu Ziyu was taken aback. Someone who could make West Mountain Old Sect, a big shot of evil cultivators, come out personally was definitely not an ordinary person. Most likely, it was only the top experts of those famous sections. It's Lin Yi. Ning Shangling smiled faintly. Lin Yi. Ning Shangling was instantly shocked and couldn't help but be moved. Is that true? How did he offend West Mountain Old Sect? The reason is actually very simple. He killed an evil cultivator named Wu Bao Liang. This person was the direct disciple of the West Mountain Sect's elder, and he was also his nephew. That's why this old thief was alerted, Ning Shangling explained. So that's how it is. No wonder the old thief was so angry. But with such a big shot evil cultivator at the opening of the mountain personally hunting him down, how could he still live until now? Could it be that there's some expert protecting him? Lu Ziyu couldn't help but ask curiously, although she hadn't paid attention to Lin Yi before. Since he could participate in the West Island trial, it meant that his strength was at most at the peak of the nascent soul stage. This strength was already extremely high for most cultivators, but in front of evil cultivators at the level of West Mountain Old Sect, he was no different from an ordinary person. He could be crushed to death with just a thought. If there wasn't an expert helping him, Lu Ziyu wouldn't believe that a mere nascent soul stage expert could survive under the hands of West Mountain Old Sect. It was simply a fantasy. There really isn't. It's not like you don't know about the South Continent's sea, apart from the Spirit Beast clan, who can contend against the experts of West Mountain Old Sect. Ning Shangling laughed. That's true. The Spirit Beast clan secludes themselves from the world, and evil cultivators or not have nothing to do with them. They're not like the famous sects who would shout at an old thief like West Mountain Old Sect. If there's no personal enmity, normally no one would take the initiative to deal with West Mountain Old Sect. Lu Ziyu nodded, and then became interested. She asked curiously, but if that's the case, how did Lin Yi escape from West Mountain Old Sect? It's not quite possible with just his own words, right? When I first saw the tip-off, I actually also felt that it was incredible. But the fact is that Lin Yi survived from the hands of West Mountain Old Sect with his own strength. Ning Shangling sighed with emotion. How is this possible? Lu Ziyu was greatly astonished. At their level, there were very few things that could cause her to lose her composure. But a mere original infant stage cultivator was able to escape from the West Mountain Elders' pursuit. This was not only shocking, it was completely subverting their worldview. Apart from Lin Yi himself and Grandmaster Shishan, I'm afraid no one else knows the specific process. But according to my informant in West Island, one thing is certain. The reason why Lin Yi was able to escape death was that he escaped into the interior of the South Island. Ning Shangling said. He escaped to the South Island? No wonder West Mountain Old Sect didn't dare to chase after him. But for a nascent soul stage cultivator to be able to escape from the territory of the spiritual beasts unscathed, that's an unprecedented miracle. Lu Ziyu sighed from the bottom of her heart. She glanced at Ning Shangling and said, "In that case, this child is really extraordinary. It's not strange that you want to take him in as a son-in-law. If he can really grow up in the future, he might not be inferior to that one of yours." "That's right. That's what I was thinking at first. But unfortunately, it looks like it's impossible now. But there's heaven's will in the unseen world. Fertile water should not flow to outsiders, so I'll give it to your precious disciple." Ning Shangling covered her mouth and laughed. "Humph, he abducted my disciple and trapped him in the trial grounds. I haven't even settled the score with him. No matter how talented he is, I won't agree to let die or go with him." Lu Ziyu snorted coldly, with a face full of anger. Her, Ziyu, don't be so harsh with your words. Maybe by the time the two of them come out of the trial ground, they'll already have a child. Ning Shangling, who had always been graceful and magnanimous, now had a rare hint of mischievous playfulness on her face. Lu Ziyu's expression immediately changed. She hesitated for a moment, and then said, unable to put down her pride, "That won't do either. No matter what, I won't hand Dai, or over to this kid, whose background I don't know." Her. Speaking of which, Lin knows you very well, so it's not like you don't know anything about him. You still don't know, right? He's from the North Island's 3 great pavilions. He's a disciple that our old senior, Shanghai Tianhua, thinks highly of, Ning Shangling revealed with a smile. "Oh, is that true?" Lu Ziyu was finally moved. Although she was shocked when she heard about Lin Yi's amazing deeds, she didn't have a good impression of him. But when she heard that Lin Yi was actually a subordinate of Shanghai Tianhua, this was a completely different matter. Both Lu Ziyu and Ning Shangling had hundreds of years of friendship with Shanghai Tianhua, although Shanghai Tianhua was a senior because they had been teachers for a period of time. The closeness of their relationship was not something that could be explained clearly with just a few words. If Lin Yi was really a disciple that Shanghai Tianhua thought highly of, then no matter how reluctant she was, she couldn't possibly continue to refuse to let him go. Of course it's true. This time, he's a special envoy from the North Island personally appointed by Shanghai Tianhua. Otherwise, why do you think I'd consider him? Ning Shangling shook her head and laughed. If one wanted to become Ning Shangling's husband, it wasn't enough to just be strong. The most important thing was to know his background. Only then could they ensure the stability of the West Island in the future. If that's really the case, Lu Ziyu's expression changed. She muttered to herself for a moment, then finally sighed and said, "Forget it. If it really doesn't work, I'll just wait here for a few years. Since he's a disciple that Big Brother Shangguan thinks highly of, he's a good match for Dai. I really can't say anything more. Ziyu, if you can really have Lin Yi as your son-in-law, it's your blessing. If it wasn't for the fact that I've already announced that only those who pass the trial can become my son-in-law, do you think I'd give him to you so easily? And you're still sighing here, as if you've suffered a great loss. I really don't know what to say." Ning Shangling didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Lu Ziyu smiled a little awkwardly. Although there was nothing wrong with what she said, Hui Yudi was, after all, the flesh of her heart. She had treated her like her own daughter since she was young. Now that she suddenly found out that the flesh of her heart was going to leave with someone else, she really didn't feel good. Most parents probably had this kind of mentality. As the two of them were talking, a disciple from the West Island suddenly came in to report. He said in an urgent tone, reporting to Island Lord, "When I was registering the trial takers just now, I found a person named Kong Mingming digging up an immature thunder schwanwu, and he even dug it up by the roots." Chapter 47:33. It was no exaggeration to say that Kong Ming-ming's behavior was no less than coming to the temporary imperial residence of the island owner to rob and smash the heirloom treasure of West Island. If the news got out, he would be infuriated by both humans and gods. It was no wonder that Ning Shangling was furious. This guy is so hateful. Lu Ziyu was also filled with righteous indignation. As an old friend of Ning Shangling for many years, she knew clearly what the Thunder Xian Ratan meant to West Island. She couldn't help but wonder, but how did Kong Ming find the Thunder Xian Ratan? Such an important route map shouldn't be leaked, right? I also think it's very strange. We must investigate this matter carefully. Ning Shangling frowned and said, it was true that the existence of the Thunder Xian Ratan in West Island's trial was not a secret. In fact, many trial takers came for the Thunder Xian Ratan, but the specific location of the Thunder Xian Ratan was a top secret in West Island. Even among the inner disciples of West Island, only a few disciples who were valued by Ning Shangling would get a hint, and the others had no way to know. Even with the deep relationship between Lu Ziyu and Ning Shangling, it was only because Lu Ziyu had made great contributions to West Island that he revealed it to her, and it had never been spread before. Whether it was Lu Ziyu or those disciples valued by Ning Shangling, they were all absolutely reliable people. Normally, there was no reason for them to leak such an important secret. How did Kong Ming know it? Could it be that this guy injured Dai, and forced the information out of her? Lu Ziyu was suddenly alarmed. Ning Shangling also nodded thoughtfully. Most of the participants in the trial of West Island were outsiders, and there were not many local disciples in West Island. To prevent the secret of the Thunder Xian Ratan from being leaked, Ning Shangling didn't give them any hint this time. That was to say, among these people, only Hui Yudi knew the location of the Thunder Xian Ratan. According to this inference, Kong Ming was very likely to get the clue from Hui Yudi, and this thing could be combined with Lin Yi's injury. Lin Yi might be trying to save Hui Yudi. That was why he was severely injured by Kong Ming. And it was also because of this that Hui Yudi did not hesitate to sacrifice her life and reputation to stay inside to accompany him. In just a short moment, Ning Shangling and Lu Ziyu had spontaneously formed a complete sequence of events. The more they thought about it, the more logical they felt it to be, almost certain that it was the truth. This Kong Ming really deserves to die, Lu Ziyu said angrily through gritted teeth. Ning Shangling nodded with an ugly expression, not saying a word. She was far more infuriated than Lu Ziyu, but as the ruler of the Western Island, there was nothing she could do. After all, everything in the trial was up to fate, and it was common for people to kill others and seize their treasures. Moreover, there was no rule that she couldn't touch the Thunder Xian vine in advance. Even if she wanted to punish Kong Ming, what reason did she have to take revenge afterwards? What Kong Ming did was shameless, but if Ning Shangling really blamed him for it, the whole West Island would become the laughingstock of the world. It was related to the reputation of West Island, so she could only swallow it. In the blink of an eye, half a month had passed, and there was still no news from Lin Yi and Hui Yudi. In fact, everyone knew that the two of them had been trapped inside and couldn't get out. The maximum time limit for a master at the peak of the nascent soul realm was 1 month, and a whole month and a half had passed, just because the masters above the nascent soul realm couldn't activate the transmitting formation. Even immortals couldn't come out again. The trial in the Western Island was so noisy that it couldn't keep dragging on like this. After all, there had to be a final conclusion, or it would be like breaking the promise. Although Ning Shuefei had pleaded with Ning Shangling several times these days, she, Han Jingjing, and Shanghai Laner all believed her. She asked her to try to delay it for a while, preferably until Lin Yi came back. She, Han Jingjing, and Shanghai Laner all believed it. As long as Linny recovered, he would definitely find a way to get out. However, this kind of thing couldn't be decided by Ning Shangling alone. After all, this was a big event of the whole West Island, and all the sects of other Heaven Stage islands were paying attention to it. No matter how much she spoiled her daughter, she couldn't make fun of the reputation of the whole West Island. Delaying it for half a month was the limit, and she really couldn't delay it any longer. Regarding this result, Ning Xuefei, who had just recovered a little from the blow of Lin Yi's serious injury, really wanted to cry, but had no tears because she already knew who was the destined winner this time. She hated this person very much, and she wouldn't entrust her life to this kind of person even if she was beaten to death. But she had no choice. After all, this represented the credibility and face of the whole West Island, and she couldn't just say no to it. After half a month, in everyone's expectation, the Island Master's Palace finally opened to the public again. All the trial takers who had participated in the West Island trial were invited to the side courtyard of the palace, in the courtyard of the transmission formation. Today, the final winner of the West Island trial would be publicly judged here. The reason why they didn't choose the more grand and formal square outside was mainly to take care of the trial takers. After all, these treasures would be taken away after the evaluation. As the saying went, one shouldn't show one's wealth. If they were placed in a public place outside, it was hard to guarantee that they wouldn't get into trouble later. Now they were placed in the relatively secret side courtyard of the Island Master's Palace. Although this kind of thing couldn't be completely eliminated, it was better. The side courtyard was heavily guarded, and it was crowded with people. Not only a group of trial takers gathered here, but also the branch managers of the Hong's Chamber of Commerce, the Central Chamber of Commerce, the Wealthy Chamber of Commerce, and so on. As the most authoritative industry insiders, they were the important judges specially invited by West Island. After a brief opening speech, everyone soon got to the long-awaited topic. A group of West Island disciples took out the previous registration books and asked the trial takers to take them out one by one to compare in public, and a group of judges evaluated them on the spot. Only the one with the highest evaluation would have the last laugh. This was undoubtedly a treasure appraisal conference. Every time someone took out a rare treasure of heaven and earth, there would be a burst of whispers in the side courtyard. Many people knew that they couldn't compare with other trial takers, but this time they could see so many kinds of treasures of heaven and earth which could be regarded as an eye-opener, and they didn't come in vain. Of course, there were also some trial takers who were very ambitious. Relying on the rare treasures of heaven and earth in their hands, they thought that this time they could have a chance to become Ning Shangling's son-in-law, and then they could have a meteoric rise. However, when it was Kong Mingming's turn, everything stopped abruptly. Thunder Xian Ra Tan. It turned out to be the legendary Thunder Xian Ra Tan. Chapter 4734. DSDX, the PP software for the novel has been developed. Please go to the bottom of the HP and website, and you can install the PP software for Android and Apple. This kind of treasure of heaven and earth didn't even need to be judged by experts. The value of the Thunder Mystic Vine was beyond doubt. Even if all the other treasures of heaven and earth on the scene were added together, they would not be as valuable as the Thunder Mystic Vine. Of course, the managers of the Chambers of Commerce and other experts had already seen that this Thunder Mystic Vine was not fully mature. But even if it was an immature Thunder Mystic Vine, it was still a Thunder Mystic Vine. After its value was discounted, it still dominated the scene. No other treasure of heaven and earth could compare with it. Even if it was an immature Thunder Mystic Vine, it could still be used to refine the Thunder Mystic Pill. Although its quality would definitely be affected, and it couldn't guarantee that it would pass the Thunder Tribulation, there was still a great chance. Judging from this point alone, it was still a rare treasure that could only be found but not sought. Looking at the complacent Kong, Ming, all the trial takers present suddenly became listless. At this time, no matter how unwilling they were, it was futile. The value of all the treasures of heaven and earth they had was not even a fraction of what he had. How could they compare with him? The trial takers were just shocked and frustrated, but the eyes of the disciples of the Western Island, when they looked at Kong Ming, were full of undisguised anger. He had uprooted the thunder mystic vine that belonged to the Western Island, and it was still an immature thunder mystic vine. This meant that he had overdrawn the priceless treasure of the Western Island's trial in the future. In other words, this bastard had simply robbed the thunder mystic vine that should have belonged to them, and he had done it in such a way that would cause the wrath of both men and gods. This was intolerable. If it weren't for Ning Shangling and Yen Xinlan restraining them, the disciples of the Western Island would have already rushed up and torn the bastard Kong Ming into pieces. He had robbed the master's treasure and dared to show it off in the master's house. Who gave him such courage? Kong Ming was completely unaware of this. At this moment, he was full of excitement. While enjoying the shocked and envious gazes of the crowd, he looked at Ning Xuefei in the distance greedily at the thought that such a delicate little beauty, who was also the noble princess of the Western Island, would soon be his. He couldn't help swallowing his saliva. West Island had made the right choice this time. Su Lingchong wasn't as stupid as Kong Xiaoming. He secretly poked Kong Xiaoming in the back. Kong Xiaoming shuddered when he noticed that the disciples of the Western Island looked like they were going to eat him alive. Damn it, where did lunch break come from? For a moment, feeling the malicious eyes of the West Island disciples from all directions, Kong Ming was so scared that he almost peed his pants. His future mother-in-law deliberately left such a blank period of time. Could it be that she wanted to give these West Island disciples a chance to take advantage of it? Kong Ming was a schemer himself, so when he encountered this kind of thing, his mind was naturally full of conspiracy theories. Think about it. If they could kill him before the results were announced, then they could take back the thunder abstruse vines justifiably. And the price that the West Island had to pay was just a scapegoat. It was a good deal, no matter how he thought about it. At this moment, facing the envious eyes of the other trial takers, Kong Ming was sweating profusely, and even his legs were weak from fear. Why didn't Ning Shangling play by the rules? What should he do now? Seeing the other trial takers leave one after another, Kong Ming suddenly felt like he was sitting on pins and needles. He subconsciously prepared to run away, but was stopped by Su Lingchong. Kong Ming suggested nervously, "Child Su, the situation is not good. Why don't we run away now? Anyway, Linny can't come back. As long as we don't let him get involved with Ning Xuefei, we can take the thunder abstruse vines back and complete the task, right?" "Don't panic," Su Lingchong snorted. Of course, he also knew that the situation was serious. They had dug up an immature thunder abstruse vines from the roots, and they had greatly offended almost all the West Island disciples. Even if Ning Shangling didn't say anything, the people below might take the initiative to assassinate them. This kind of thing was impossible to guard against. But Kong Ming still wanted to run away. For him, the most dangerous period before the final results were announced, especially in this place where the West Island masters were everywhere. If someone was ruthless enough to launch a sneak attack on him, he wouldn't even know how he died. To be continued. This book is collected from a website. Please move to the pavilion. The chapters are clear and updated quickly. As usual, Hui Yudi came to the open space outside the teleportation array. There were valleys on both sides, and she could only bask in the sun at noon. However, before she could put down her phone, she suddenly saw a shadow flashing in the corner of her eyes. Who? Yuri was frightened. However, after looking around, she didn't see anyone. Instead, the wind was quite strong, and the sound of it was whistling. It was just a false alarm. Yuri heaved a sigh of relief. Now that Lin Yi was unconscious, she could only rely on herself. To be honest, she really felt a little uneasy. Although she was a nascent soul-perfected expert, she was still a weak girl. Moreover, her strength was not invincible in this place, and there was still Scarface and his gang. As usual, after charging the phone, Yuri put away her phone and returned to her hiding place to take care of Lin Yi. However, before she could sit down, there was a sudden sound of messy footsteps. Then she saw a man with a domineering aura. He brought a group of ferocious-looking subordinates with him. It was Scarface and his gang. "It's you!" Yuri turned pale with fright. She hurriedly stood in front of the unconscious Lin Yi and looked at Scarface with fear and caution. This guy obviously didn't come with good intentions. "Oh, it's really here." Scarface looked at Yuri from head to toe, drooling. His eyes shone brightly as he swallowed his saliva. It seemed like he wanted to pounce on her. Previously, when he saw Yuri, she was wearing a veil. Therefore, he only knew that this girl had an alluring figure. As for what her face looked like, he didn't know. Therefore, even if Scarface had some thoughts, he wouldn't be too impulsive. After all, in this day and age, looking at someone's back would make people commit a crime. Looking at someone's face would make people defend themselves. In fact, there were many girls in the Heaven Stage Island. But now, because there was no one around, Yuri had already taken off her veil. Her delicate and alluring face was unreservedly displayed in front of everyone, coupled with her seductive figure. If Scarface and his gang didn't have any thoughts of committing a crime at this time, it could only mean that they weren't men. Looking at their obscene expressions, Yuri's heart sank to the bottom of the valley. She secretly regretted that she was too careless. The figure she had glimpsed from the corner of her eyes was not an illusion at all. It was a spy of Scarface and his gang. Only in this way could she explain why these people suddenly appeared here. Yuri didn't guess wrong. It was the truth. Every year, after the West Island trial ended, the scar-faced man would always bring people to the exit to patrol. This was his usual practice because, according to past experience, there would always be a few unlucky challengers at this time of the year who never gave up, making their last struggle here. Of course, this was wishful thinking. After a month, no one could go out. They could only have a chance when the next trial began. As the local emperor, Scarface knew this better than anyone else. And according to his experience, after about a month and a half, these unlucky guys who were making their last struggle would give up one after another. This was the best time for him to come out and recruit his underlings. That was why he sent his men to check out the situation. He didn't expect to accidentally find a beauty like Yuri. Looking at Yuri's charming and attractive appearance, Scarface couldn't help but start howling like a wolf. Although he still had some fear in his heart because of Lin Yi's slap, Lin Yi was still lying there and couldn't move. He was a master at the peak of the early stage of mysterious ascension. How could he be scared by a half-dead person? As for Yuri herself, Scarface had learned his lesson from Su Lingchong. Although he was afraid that this chick's strength was not to be underestimated, he was still captivated by her beauty. He was a man who had held back for decades. Now that he had suddenly seen such a beauty, he would not be Scarface, but the teenage mutant ninja Turtle. I'm finally done writing. Murloc can't wait to play School Bell 3D. Yesterday, he was already over level 20 with more than 5 million combat power. Today, he will continue to work hard to break through the rankings. After a few days, I will show everyone Murloc's account. This is a new gift pack benefit that Murloc has made for everyone. Enter the following activation code in the game to receive it. Audiobook. Chapter 47:36. What do you want? Yuri pretended to be calm as she furrowed her brows. She was extremely anxious in her heart, because this was a place she had specially found for Lin Yi. There was only one exit, but it was completely blocked by Scarface and his men. There was no way to escape, so the only way was to brace herself and scare Scarface away. Nothing much. I just heard from my subordinates that you were still here, so I came over to see if there was anything I could help you with. Scarface smiled. Due to his last bit of fear, he didn't want to force himself on her. If he could make this girl lower her head, that would be for the best. No need. I advise you to quickly take these people away. Otherwise, if they disturb my peace, don't blame me for being impolite. Yuri pretended to be strong as she coldly snorted. Is that so? So the young lady wanted peace and quiet? That's good, but this place is really too lousy. It can't block the wind or the rain. No matter how you look at it, it doesn't seem to have anything to do with peace. Scarface pinched his chin as he laughed. Yuri looked at him coldly and didn't say anything. She didn't know what this guy was planning. The difference in strength between her and the enemy was too great. Unless it was absolutely necessary, she couldn't shed all pretense of cordiality and could only feign civility. Looking at the entire training grounds, I'm afraid that the only place that is quiet is my place. If you don't mind, why don't you come to my place to stay? Scarface suggested maliciously. No need, I'm fine staying here. You guys can go. Yuri immediately refused. Miss, as the saying goes, you rely on your parents at home, and when you go out, you rely on your friends. We met by chance, and this is called fate. I'm sincerely inviting you. Don't you think you're not giving me any face? Scarface's expression changed. Then what do you want? Yuri was shocked. If the other party turned hostile, then today would be really dangerous. I don't want anything. I just want you to stay at my place for a while and accompany me while you're at it. I feel that we can cultivate our relationship. Only then did Scarface reveal his foxtail. With a face full of saliva, he chuckled and said, After all, we're all trapped in this godforsaken place and can't get out. Life has to go on. You're such a beautiful woman. You can't always be a widow with this half-dead guy. What do you say, young lady? Dream on. Yuri's expression immediately turned as cold as ice. It was fine to feign civility, but since the other party had spoken to such an extent, she could not tolerate it. Hey, little girl, let me give you a word of advice. It's best not to say things so ruthlessly. As long as you accompany me for a few days, I guarantee that no one here will dare to touch even a single hair on your head. He was afraid that he would be crushed to death by Lin Yi in the next moment. He hurriedly came up with an idea and said, Senior, I really didn't say to sleep. I said to let your wife go back with me to choose some good things as a farewell gift for you. It can also be considered a small token of my appreciation. Really? Lin Yi turned his head to look at Yuri. He held her hand and winked mischievously. At this moment, Yuri was still immersed in the sudden pleasant surprise. When she felt Lin hold her hand, she suddenly reacted. Her charming face immediately flushed red. Her cheeks were like burning clouds, and the redness had already reached her ears. She didn't hear a single word that was said clearly. However, she heard the sensitive word, wife. Seeing that Lin didn't have any intention of correcting her, especially when he took the initiative to hold her hand, did this mean that he had tacitly agreed? But he wasn't even ready yet. Wasn't this development a little too fast? How was she going to explain this to Master? Yuri's mind was filled with random thoughts. She only managed to recover when Lin Yi asked for the second time. After understanding Lin Yi's meaning, she tilted her head and said, It seems so. Then why don't we go and choose some? Damn it, the Mountain King profession really had a bright future ahead of him. Previously, he really couldn't tell that Scarface was actually a tycoon. You pick first. Lin Yi smiled at Hui Yuti, and Hui Yuti immediately pounced on him. She wouldn't be courteous to someone like Scarface, and with her experience, it was rare for her to make a mistake when it came to truly good things. After going one round, she picked 4 or 5 items. Every one of them was an extremely rare heaven and earth treasure. Scarface's heart was bleeding as he watched from the side. If it wasn't for the fact that Lin Yi's prestige was too great, he wouldn't have been able to resist it. At this moment, he couldn't help but want to risk his life. The items that Hui Yuti had picked were all his special treasures. Apart from the legendary Thunder Mystic Vine, they were the most valuable in the entire training ground. In the entire trial ground, they were the most valuable. He had spent dozens of years to collect these few, but in the end, all of them were taken by this little girl, leaving not a single one for him. Scarface wanted to slap himself 14,000 times on the spot. F***CK. It was all because of his cheap mouth. Why did he have to say that he was giving gifts? Even if he wanted to give gifts, he should have found a chance to secretly hide these items. Now, everything was exposed to Lin Yi and Hua Yuhao. This was practically sending a sheep into a tiger's mouth. But fortunately, these 2 people could only take 8 or 10 items at most. No matter how many items they had, they wouldn't be able to take them away. The other slightly inferior heaven and earth treasures could still be left. This time, he would just treat it as him spending money to avoid disaster. Helplessly, Scarface could only comfort himself like this. After waiting for Hui Yuti to finish picking, this little girl was still pouting. If it wasn't for the fact that her backpack was almost broken, she would have taken a few more. In any case, this was a rare opportunity, so it would be a waste not to take it. You won't blame us for taking so many gifts from you, right? Lin Yi looked at Hui Yuti's expression and couldn't help but laugh. He turned his head and glanced at the grimacing Scarface. No, how could that be possible? Scarface hurriedly smiled and shook his head. He forced a smile and said, "Senior, it is my honor that you have taken a liking to these items. The more you take, the more you think highly of me. I can't be happier. If you want to take all of them, it's fine." Really? Lin Yi looked at him with a smile that wasn't a smile. Really, it's even truer than real gold. I'm definitely speaking from the bottom of my heart. Scarface patted his chest as he spoke. He wasn't puffing himself up to look impressive, but he was already numb to it. Since the few treasures that he had kept as his trump cards had already been plundered by Hui Yuti, even if 5 or 6 more treasures were taken from him, it wouldn't hurt at all. Oh, since it's so difficult to refuse, then I'll respectfully accept. I'll take them all away. Lin Yi was instantly delighted. He had seen warm and hospitable people, but he had never seen such a warm and hospitable person. Being friends with a tycoon like Scarface was indeed satisfying. Yes. Scarface was still subconsciously echoing. After a moment, he reacted. The dignified Mountain King, at the peak of the early stage of the profound ascension realm, looked like he was about to cry. He stammered, "What? Senior, you're not joking, are you?" "No, I'm a very honest person. I usually don't joke with people." Linny nodded solemnly. "No, with so many things, are you sure you can take them away?" The scar-faced man asked cautiously. This was the place he had accumulated over the past few decades. All sorts of heavenly materials and earthly treasures had been piled up into a small mountain. Although the other party was powerful, to say that he could take away all of them was nonsense. "Oh, you don't have to worry about this. Carrying things is my strength. Linny smiled faintly. With a wave of his hand, the heavenly and earthly treasures that had piled up like a small mountain in front of him instantly disappeared into thin air. Not a single one was left. Dom. Scarface knelt on the ground on the spot. His expression was one of shock and blood. He was dumbfounded for a long time and couldn't say a word. He felt his eyes go black, and his life was in darkness. Chapter 47:38. Looking at the backs of the two leaving, Scarface collapsed to the ground with a thud. He muttered the same sentence over and over again. My baby. 2 hours later, Lin, Yi, and Hu Yudi returned to the exit of the teleportation array. Hu Yudi was still laughing. She had been laughing the whole way. She was happy whenever she thought of Scarface's last expression. Hee, are you done? He suffered such a huge blow. As a girl, can you at least have some sympathy? Lin, he was a little speechless. You're still talking about it? It's all because of you. I think Scarface is so depressed that he wants to commit suicide. How pitiful, hee. Huyudi laughed as she spoke. She really didn't think that Lin would be so strange. He directly took away all of Scarface's savings. Anyone would jump off a building in such a situation. This is called spending money to avoid disaster. It's already very good for him. Otherwise, do you think I would let him go so easily? Lin smiled indifferently. Although Scarface didn't have time to attack him and Huyudi, and didn't cause any substantial harm, Lin could clearly sense what this guy had done. It was only because he was in a good mood that he was able to keep his life. Otherwise, if it were any other time, Lin might have killed him directly. Looking at his despairing look, I'm afraid he might as well die. Huyudi covered her mouth and laughed lightly. As they spoke, the two of them arrived at the exit of the teleportation array. She, who was originally in a good mood, suddenly frowned. She looked at Lin helplessly and said, What do we do now? We definitely can't get out of here. It seems like we can only wait until the next trial starts. Are the restrictions of this teleportation array really so strict? Lin also frowned. If it wasn't for Ning Xuefei, being trapped here wouldn't be a big problem. At worst, he could just treat it as a closed-door training. But now that it was related to Ning Xuefei's marriage, they had to quickly think of a way to get out. It should be, when you were unconscious, I asked the two West Island guards for advice, and they told me very clearly, even the strongest attack of a nascent soul stage cultivator could only barely activate the teleportation after a month. Moreover, they would have to use all of their strength to activate the teleportation. But now, it has already been a month and a half. Huyudi sighed. If it weren't for such a long time, with Lin Yi's strength far beyond the peak of Yuanying realm, she believed that he could give it a try. Maybe he could really break the limit of 1 month. But now, an entire month and a half had passed. It was impossible, no matter how he thought about it. If that's the case, why didn't you try to open it once, throw me out, and then teleport yourself again? Linny couldn't help but ask. That's what I thought, and I even specifically asked the two West Island guards about it. They said that it might not work, and with your condition at that time, it was very difficult for you to withstand the high load of the teleportation process. I was afraid that something would happen to you, so I didn't dare to try. Huyudi shook her head and added, Furthermore, even with my strength at the peak nascent soul stage, it's impossible for me to continuously unleash my strongest attack in a short period of time. I can't hold back at all. So that's how it is. Linny nodded in realization. He could continuously activate the strongest killing move, so he subconsciously took it for granted that others were also such freaks. Strictly speaking, continuously activating the strongest killing move, this in itself was already an extremely heaven-defying ability. It was simply impossible for ordinary people to do it. This was not just a matter of talent. If it could become the strongest killing move, it would inevitably consume a lot of true chi. Many people would even consume all their true chi in one move. Lin Yi also relied on the jade pendant to replenish his true chi, so he could be so unscrupulous and casual. If it was a cultivator like Hui Yudi, she wouldn't be able to recover without a few months. By that time, the daylilies would have already rotted away. At that time, I really wanted to take a risk and try it. Maybe I could really send you out, but I definitely couldn't go out that way. I was afraid that even if you could successfully survive the teleportation, you would be targeted by Kai Zi and his accomplices when you reached the other side. I thought for a long time before giving up this idea. Hui Yudi said, and so it can really be done like this. If I activate it outside the teleportation array, there is a chance that I can send you out? Lin Yi's eyes lit up when he heard this. He just casually asked. He never thought that there was really such a possibility. After all, according to what Yin Xinlan said before the trial began, to activate the teleportation array, one must channel true chi from the inside to attack the teleportation array. The people outside couldn't attack at all. Lin Yi thought that this was a dead rule. He didn't expect that it was not completely the case. It seems to be possible. When I asked the 2 West Island guards, they didn't completely deny it. They just said that it was very difficult. Hui Yudi tried hard to recall. Then, you enter the teleportation array first. I will try it outside. If I can succeed, you can go out. Lin Yi immediately decided. You can open it? Hui Yudi was shocked. She had already given up the idea of going out. She never thought that Lin Yi would have the confidence to try it at this time. I don't dare to guarantee it, but it's not illegal to try. Anyway, I'm idle here. If it doesn't work, I'll think of other ways. Lin Yi didn't take it seriously and smiled. According to his speculation, this trial teleportation array would recognize the strength of the teleportation target. However, the final driving force used for teleportation was still the powerful true chi absorbed by the array eye. In other words, even after a month, as long as the true chi produced was enough to be converted into the driving force for teleportation, then the teleportation array would be activated. After all, that 1-month deadline was only set for ordinary nascent soul stage cultivators who could activate the extreme power of true chi. It definitely didn't include him, Lin Yi. Of course, this was only a guess of Lin Yi's. Whether or not he could succeed still depended on the result of the attempt. As long as this theory was established, Lin Yi believed that the 2 of them should be able to leave smoothly, because the power of the move he activated was far above that of ordinary nascent soul stage cultivators. Although a month and a half had passed, there was still a possibility of success. Oh, all right then. Seeing that Lin Yi was so excited, although Hui Yudi felt that it was impossible, she still obediently walked into the teleportation array. Chapter 4739. If there were no special moves, ordinary cultivators would not be able to attack it from the outside. However, this obstacle was naturally not difficult for Lin Yi. If he only wanted to attack the array inside, he had at least 5 ways. But now that he needed to use the strongest martial arts, Lin Yi undoubtedly chose the 5 elements murderous aura. With a soul-stirring low dragon roar, a 5 elements murderous aura rushed out of Lin Yi's palm. Although the speed was extremely fast and overbearing, it gave people the feeling that it was like a real dragon floating. As long as Lin Yi thought about it, it could easily change direction at any time. Not surprisingly, the 5 elements murderous aura hit the teleportation array, without any suspense. Then, under the extremely surprised eyes of Hui Yudi, the entire teleportation array suddenly glowed with a dazzling white light, and it was actually activated. Seeing Hui Yudi's figure disappear in the teleportation array, Lin Yi suddenly felt relieved. Just now, he only used 50% of his true chi, and he was able to send Huayuti away smoothly. It could be seen that even if the theory he had imagined was not completely correct, it should be close to it. His previous guess was right. The reason why the West Island officials stated that 1 month was the teleportation limit was that the attack limit of a Yuanying stage master could only reach this step. But Lin was different. His real strength was now comparable to a real master of the profound ascending stage, and the power of his martial arts was far from comparable to other masters of the Yuanying stage. Not only that, Lin was only a master of the middle stage, Yuanying stage on the surface. The true chi he urged was also the true chi of the Yuanying stage, but the power was amazing, so it was not limited by the level of the teleportation array. Otherwise, if it was a master of the profound ascending stage, the teleportation array might not be able to bear the true chi of the profound ascending stage. Naturally, there was no way to send people out like Lin Yi. Perhaps this was the real trick. It was like a ferry wanting to cross a 100-mile river with high wind and waves. The ferry had to have enough power, or else it would be impossible to reach the other side. At the same time, the passengers on the ferry could not exceed the load of the ferry itself, or else they would not even be qualified to board the ferry, let alone cross the river. Ordinary Yuanying stage masters can't provide such a strong force. And as for the masters of the profound ascending stage, although they have this power, they are seriously overweight and can't board the ship. Only a freak like Lin Yi, the weight of a Yuanying stage master, has the power of a profound ascending stage master. Only then could he succeed in forcing his way through. Without hesitation, Lin Yi immediately approached the teleportation formation, and another 5 elements' murderous aura activated the teleportation. In the afternoon, after experiencing a torturous wait that felt like a year, Kong Ming and Su Lingchong finally got through the daunting experience without mishap, and they successfully waited until the moment when the trial results would be announced. In the side courtyard of the palace, a group of judges and trial takers gathered once again. When they saw Ning Shangling and Ning Xuefei reappear in front of everyone, the corners of Kong Ming's mouth curled up. Looking at Ning Xuefei, he couldn't help but swallow his saliva. From now on, this little beauty will belong to him. Seeing Kong Ming's undisguised perverted expression, Ning Xuefei couldn't help but feel nauseous. She looked helplessly at Ning Shangling in front of her, hoping that her mother could help her get rid of this shameless bastard. Unfortunately, in the face of her daughter's request for help, Ning Shangling had no response. As the master of West Island, on this occasion, no matter how much she cared about Ning Xuefei, it was impossible for her to say anything in public. In fact, even if she had arranged any backup plan, it was impossible to let Ning Xuefei know that these dirty things were enough for her as a mother. Now, it was not Ning Xuefei's turn to bear the burden. However, she didn't know that the innocent and kind daughter in Ning Shangling's eyes had secretly made up her mind at this moment. If she really let Kong Ming, this shameless bastard, succeed today, then she would follow the example of Shanghai Laner's small curly bear and find a chance to kill Kong Ming so that he and Su Lingchong could sympathize with each other. Kong Ming was totally unaware of this. He was still immersed in the dream of ruling the harem of West Island. If Su Lingchong hadn't reminded him from time to time, he would have laughed like a fool. Thank you, judges. All the results of the trial takers have been accurately measured. I believe it is fair and objective enough. I will announce the final result now. Ning Shangling glanced at the audience and announced slowly. Before she finished speaking, everyone's eyes had automatically focused on Kong Ming. Everyone knew that this guy must be the winner, who had the last laugh. There was no doubt about it. However, at this moment, a commotion suddenly came from the direction of the teleportation portal not far away. Everyone turned to look. only to find that two people had suddenly appeared at the teleportation portal's exit. In an instant, everyone present was dumbfounded. "Hey, everyone is here. It seems that we are not late. How lucky we are." Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, Lin Yi smiled faintly as he walked towards them. Hui Yudi followed behind him with a light smile. This time, it had been delayed for half a month. Lin Yi thought that the result had already been settled, and things would be a little tricky to deal with. However, he didn't expect that Ning Shangling had also delayed for half a month, and he and Hui Yudi happened to catch up. This was really a coincidence. Lin Yi. Ning Xuefei's eyes instantly lit up. Han Jingjing and Shangguan Laner, who were by her side, had already shouted for Lin Yi and little junior brother while cheering and jumping as they rushed over. If not for her mother blocking in front of her, Ning Xuefei would probably have rushed over even faster than the two of them. However, she could only wave desperately from afar. Lin Yi chuckled as he responded to the girls. Meanwhile, Hui Yudi, who was behind him, couldn't wait to run over to Lu Ziyu's side. Lu Ziyu had been very worried for her during this period of time. She had clearly become a little haggard, and looking at her made her heart ache. "Brother Ling, you're fine. I knew you wouldn't die so easily." When Han laughed loudly at the side, he came forward with Xia Luo Luo and gave Lin Yi a fierce bear hug. In this half a month, he had really been on tenterhooks. Every day, he didn't know the taste of his food and couldn't sleep at night. He had lost a lot of weight, and even his originally masculine aura had become a little shallow. Sorry to have made you guys worry. Lin Yi was touched. If they weren't brothers who had gone through thick and thin with each other, why would they be so worried for him? When Han had not been a brother for nothing. Chapter 4740. This disciple from the North Island. Are you questioning the impartiality of our West Island? Yen Xinlan immediately stared at Kang Ming with anger and murderous intent in her eyes. This guy not only dug up the Thunder Xian vine, but also dared to question West Island in public for opening the back door for Lin Yi. In her eyes, it was a deliberate provocation. Did he really think that West Island didn't kill people? No, I just feel strange. Otherwise, how can we explain this guy's sudden appearance? Is that right? Kang Ming was shocked when he saw this, and quickly pulled the other people present to be his shield. After all, everyone like him was curious about how Lin Yi and Hui Yudi could suddenly appear. In fact, not only these people, at this time, even Ning Shangling, Yen Xinlan, and the other high-level members of West Island also felt that it was incredible. After a whole month and a half, they could still be transmitted out. This was something that had never happened before. This was the first time, which was simply unprecedented. Oh, it seems that you're really curious about this. Then I'll be merciful and tell you that it was the master of the profound ascending stage who sent us out. Lin Yi smiled lightly. What? Impossible. If he can send you out, why didn't he come out himself? Kang Ming's brain worked very fast this time, and he immediately found a flaw. Everyone else was also confused, especially Ning Shangling and others. They were familiar with the operation of the teleportation formation, and they knew that it was impossible for a master of the profound ascending stage to start the teleportation formation. They had tried many times before, but they had never succeeded. Then you can ask him. That guy has been trapped in there for so many years. Who knows what he has learned? There are so many weird people these days. Lin Yi made up irresponsibly. He didn't want others to doubt him, so he simply made up his mind. Anyway, no one could ask the scarred man for confirmation now. Whatever he said, it was useless even if he doubted it. Hui Yudi giggled when she heard this. However, she immediately tightened her expression. Since Lin Yi didn't want others to know, then she could only accompany him to keep it a secret until the end of time. Everyone looked at each other when they heard this. Scarface and the other trial takers had all seen this before. How could such a greedy and cruel mountain king be so kind as to send someone out for no reason? However, no matter how much they didn't believe it, there was nothing they could do. Just as Linny thought, there was no way to verify this matter. As long as Huiyuti did not expose him, he could only allow Lin Yi to spout nonsense, and in the end, it would become a meaningless case without a lead. Humph! Kong Ming Ming looked at Lin Yi and snorted coldly. He said, arrogantly, "It doesn't matter. You can't pose any threat to me anyway. I'll show you the moment of my final victory." Oh! Lin Yi smiled nonchalantly, too lazy to deal with the guy. He turned to Ning Shangling and asked, "I'm sorry, but I didn't say anything. Where can I register the spoils?" Ning Shangling smiled slightly and nodded to the disciple of West Island who was in charge of this matter. Immediately, a judge came over and appraised Lin Yi in public. Humph, the result is already obvious. What good treasure can this guy, who can't even save his life, take out? It's really a waste of everyone's time. Kong Ming Ming sneered on the side. Most of the others had the same idea. However, when they saw clearly what Linny took out, the whole audience suddenly boiled. Thunder Xian Rot Tan. It was Thunder Xian Rot Tan again. Ning Shangling, Yen Xinlan, and other high-level officials of West Island couldn't help but feel their eyelids twitch. A Thunder Xian Rot Tan was dug out by Kong Ming Ming before. That was enough to make them angry. They didn't expect that Lin Yi would take out another one now. How could other disciples of West Island survive? However, when they carefully looked at the Thunder Xian Rot Tan that Lin Yi took out, the eyes of the high-level officials of West Island suddenly became much kinder. This was a mature Thunder Xian Rot Tan, and it was not uprooted. That was to say, this was completely reasonable, and it was totally different from the one Kong Ming Ming had. Kong Ming Ming suddenly stared at it, and he couldn't say a word. He could only turn his head and look at Su Lingchong next to him. How could this pretentious guy have a Thunder Xian Rot Tan, and it's a mature Thunder Xian Rot Tan? Su Lingchong also shook his head incredulously. When they went in, there was no mature Thunder Xian Rot Tan, and there was no place for Lin Yi and Huiyuti to hide it at that time. How did it come about? The whole audience was in an uproar. Before, Kong Ming Ming was undoubtedly the first with an immature Thunder Xian Rot Tan. Unexpectedly, a mature Thunder Xian Rot Tan popped out and stepped on Kong Ming Ming. This scene was so dramatic that it seemed to have been discussed. It's impossible. How could it be possible? Where did you get it? Kong Ming Ming stared blankly, and his expression showed that he was about to go crazy. His dream of the harem in West Island was about to come true, but it was suddenly stepped on and smashed into pieces. In particular, the other party was Lin Yi, his sworn enemy. Anyone would go crazy. Oh, it was also given to me by the master of the mysterious ascension stage. He is actually a very good man. Lin Yi's irresponsible answer immediately made the audience's eyes fall to the ground. This, Kong Ming Ming, was so angry that he spat out a mouthful of blood. His eyes turned black, and he almost passed out on the spot. The higher one climbed, the harder he fell. At this moment, it was a true portrayal of him. While Lin Yi shocked the audience, Huiyuti didn't need to win the final victory like him, but she still had to go through the motions. She casually took out 2 treasures of heaven and earth that she extorted from the scarred man, and she could easily deal with it, and she wouldn't lose face for Lu Ziyu. As for the Thunder Xian Rot Tan, it was naturally better to hide it as deep as possible. Unless he had to take it, like Lin Yi. Otherwise, Only a fool would take it out in public to show off. Wouldn't that be asking for trouble for no reason? In this way, no one could shake Lin Yi's first place. No matter how unwilling Kong Mingming was, it was useless. Compared with Lin Yi's Thunder Xianra Tan, the value of his immature Thunder Xianra Tan was not just a little bit lower. There was basically no comparison between them. After all, a mature Thunder Xianra Tan could refine the best quality Thunder Xian pill, while an immature Thunder Xianra Tan could at most refine a low-grade Thunder Xian pill. The success rate of the former was close to 100%, while the latter was less than 60% at most. What was there to compare? At this time, standing in the corner, Ren Zhongyuan and the others looked at the Thunder Xianra Tan in Lin Yi's hands from afar. Their faces were filled with greed, and they couldn't help but look at each other. They really didn't think that such a weak guy would be able to get a mature Thunder Xianra Tan in the end. This kind of heaven-defying luck was really King crazy. To be continued. Chapter 47-41. Ren Zhongyuan and the others couldn't help but regret secretly. It would be great if they didn't part ways with this kid. Maybe the Thunder Xianra Tan wouldn't have fallen into this kid's hands. Instead, it would have been theirs. The longevity route that the three of them had worked so hard to get was simply a street good compared with the Thunder Xianra Tan, but it was useless to regret now. They couldn't do anything except drool at this time. Fortunately, since Lin Yi was bound to be the first, it meant that he would soon become Ning Shangling's son-in-law. Once he became West Island's son-in-law, he would definitely have nothing to do with Hui Yuri. This was Ren Zhongyuan's only self-comfort. However, at this moment, the two underlings standing behind him, Li Yuzhou and Sun Baolu, saw this scene and wanted to say something, but stopped on second thought. Hui Yuri didn't come out before, and it wasn't an exaggeration to say that her life and death were unknown. Therefore, the two of them felt that there was no need to add to Ren Zhongyuan's troubles, so they didn't say what they saw in the trial ground before. But now, not only did Hui Yuri come out, even her wild man came out with her. The two of them had to let Ren Zhongyuan know. Otherwise, if this matter were to be exposed in the future, and Ren Zhongyuan found out that they had been cuckolded for so long because of the two of them hiding it, he would definitely flip out on the spot. The two of them couldn't bear Ren Zhongyuan's monstrous anger. Brother Ren, there's something we have to tell you. You have to hold on, Li Yuzhou said cautiously. What's the matter? Ren Zhongyuan looked back at the two of them, who wanted to say something, but stopped on second thought. He couldn't help but frown. If you have something to say it quickly. That's fine. Brother Ren, you must hold on, Li Yuzhou whispered, and then gave Sun Baolu a look, motioning him to speak. Brother Ren, in fact, Hui Yuri has already hooked up with the man named Lin Yi. We saw her and Lin Yi having sex in broad daylight in the trial ground before. This is a real adulterous couple, Sun Baolu said bluntly. What the F*** are you talking about? Ren Zhongyuan slapped Sun Baolu without saying anything. Sun Baolu spun around 3 times from the slap. He saw stars and almost fainted. It wasn't that Ren Zhongyuan didn't believe them. It was just that this matter was simply impossible. Who was Hui Yuri? She was one of the Eastern Continent's prideful pair. She was a pure and innocent girl. How could she casually hook up with a man? What kind of King hookup? This kid's brain must be filled with sperm and dreaming. We're not talking nonsense. We took a photo. Hurry up and show it to Brother Ren. Sun Baolu covered his swollen mouth with one hand and looked at Ren Zhongyuan pitifully, while urging Li Yuzhou to take out the evidence. Under Ren Zhongyuan's murderous gaze, Li Yuzhou hurriedly took out his digital camera. After fiddling with it for a while, He found the photo he had taken at that time and carefully handed it to Rin Zhongyuan. Rin Zhongyuan took it and looked at it. He was stunned. Although this photo was not particularly clear, it was enough to distinguish the two protagonists in it. Who else could it be but Huiyuti lying on it? Looking at the unrestrained positions of the two people in the photo, he watched helplessly as his goddess actually hooked up with a man. Rin Zhongyuan's whole heart was cold. In an instant, he was disheartened and even had the thought of dying. Yo, I didn't expect this Miss Hua to look so pure. I didn't expect her to be so open. What a pity. Yi Xiaotian, who was next to him, came over and took a look. He couldn't help but swallow his saliva. He had also coveted Huiyuti for a long time. TSK, I have long said that she is a woman. Senior brother Run, you didn't believe me before. Now, seeing is believing. Yao Jieli didn't miss the opportunity to gossip. Huiyuti had always been high and mighty in front of them, a goddess who didn't eat the food of mortals. Now, she was finally beaten back to her original form. She was just a shameless slut. Slut, slut, slut. Rin Zhongyuan was so angry that smoke came out of his head. He gritted his teeth and looked at the adulterous couple, Lin Yi and Huiyuti. At this moment, there were only two things in his mind. Kill Lin Yi and then kill Huiyuti, the bitch. It was a pity that this was the territory of West Island, and it was also the side courtyard of the summer palace under the watchful eyes of the public. No matter how angry Ren Zhongyuan was, he could only hold it back first. Otherwise, if he moved a little, he would be the first to be unlucky. Don't worry, brother Ren. You don't have to kill to vent your anger. I have a way to embarrass this adulterous couple in front of everyone so that you can vent your anger. Li Yuzhou rolled his eyes and suggested a plan. Do you really have a way? Although Ren Zhongyuan's eyes were still full of fire, he was still a little rational. Hearing this, he turned his head and looked at him. Li Yuzhou nodded repeatedly and whispered in Li Yuzhou's ear. Ren Zhongyuan nodded again and said with a face full of resentment, "Okay, I'll do as you say. Today, let everyone see the true colors of this adulterous couple, and then I'll find a chance to kill them." While they were talking, Ning Shangling had begun to announce the result in public. Although there was no suspense, she still had to go through the formalities. Everyone, after the cross-evaluation of a group of judges, I officially announce that the final winner of this West Island trial is Lin Yi from the North Island. There weren't any cheers or noises, but everyone looked at Lin Yi with envy, especially Kang Xiaoming's eyes that were filled with venom. Since he had won the West Island test, it was time to announce the more important show. According to the rules set at the previous birthday party, the winner of this West Island trial can become my daughter's future husband. Lin Yi, are you willing? Ning Shangling's eyes fell on Lin Yi, and there was a little imperceptible joy in her eyes. After all, he was the candidate she had been optimistic about for a long time. It was not an exaggeration to say that he was a dragon among men. What was more, he had a relationship with her daughter, and the two could be said to be a match made in heaven. Lin Yi glanced at Ning Xuefei, who was so shy that her heart was in a mess for a moment. Answering this question meant that he would be married to Ning Xuefei from now on, which was too unfair to the other women who had been waiting for him. Be it in terms of feelings or bonds, any one of them was far above Ning Xuefei. In terms of status, they were the ones who should be at the top. He felt that he owed them far too much, and he wouldn't be able to repay this debt in a lifetime. However, it was an emergency, and it was impossible for Lin Yi to retreat at this time. Under the eyes of the public, he nodded solemnly and said, "I'm willing." Murloc, the player of Campus Bells mobile game one, has suggested with the game company that in the latest Campus Bells mobile game, 3D, The old players will be rewarded for topping up. The reward will be given in 3D according to the topping up ratio of Campus Bell's mobile game 1. For more information, please pay attention to Urine 22. Chapter 47-42. These 3 simple words made Ning Xuefei immersed in unparalleled shyness and joy, although she had been thinking a lot these days. And although her heart belonged to Lin Yi, she also knew that this matter was actually too hasty. Therefore, she had been a little hesitant in her heart. She wasn't sure if she could really entrust the rest of her life to him. However, because of Lin Yi's serious injuries, this hesitance and uneasiness in the past half a month had been covered up. She didn't expect that things would take a turn today. Only then did Ning Xuefei realize that she was really going to settle down with Lin Yi. All of this happened too suddenly, so suddenly that she was caught unprepared. She didn't know how to react. But now, although Ning Xuefei still didn't know what the future would be, she already knew her feelings. Because when she heard these 3 words from Lin Yi, she was very relieved and happy. This was already enough. Hearing these 3 words from Lin Yi, Han Jingjing and Laner, who were crowding around him, suddenly felt a little sour in their hearts for some reason. This feeling was complicated and difficult to understand. They had never felt this way before. With their characters, they rarely worried about anything. Even when Lin Yi was seriously injured this time, they were only worried for a while at the beginning. Later on, when they found out that Lin Yi was fine, they quickly returned to their previous state. However, this time, they couldn't help but feel an indescribable bitterness in their hearts. It was as if their beloved things had been snatched away. Although they knew that Lin Yi wouldn't leave them because of this, they still felt an inexplicable sense of loss. However, the 2 of them wouldn't really be bothered by this matter. After all, the idea of letting Lin Yi become Ning Xuefei's future husband was instigated by the 2 of them at the beginning. In the future, they would eventually have such a day. It was just that their best friend, Ning Xuefei, had gotten ahead of them temporarily. Compared to Han Jingjing and Laner, Hui Yuri was really worried about her gains and losses. Looking at Lin Yi, she couldn't help but bite her lips. She didn't know how she should react at this moment. Should she congratulate Lin Yi, or should she hold a grudge against this heartless man who doesn't know how to flirt? Hui Yuri couldn't help but feel a little regretful. She regretted coming out and staying in the trial with Lin Yi. Wouldn't that be great? Once they came out, Lin Yi would definitely marry Ning Xuefei. This was something that had been announced long ago, and Lin Yi had also told her personally. How could he have forgotten about such an important matter just now? At the side, Lu Ziyu sighed. She patted Hui Yuri's hand lightly. Hui Yuri was her precious disciple, whom she had brought up since she was young. She wasn't even her biological daughter, but she was even closer to her biological daughter. How could she not know what Hui Yuri was thinking about? She originally thought that it would be nice if Lin Yi could become a couple with her precious disciple. Unfortunately, fate made fools of people. Now that Lin Yi had become Ning Xuefei's future husband, he definitely couldn't marry anyone else. Not only the people of West Island wouldn't agree, but even she, Lu Ziyu, wouldn't agree. Seeing that Lin Yi agreed in public, Ning Shangling was happy. She was about to officially decide on their marriage. However, before she spoke, 2 people suddenly stood out from the crowd and said loudly, "No." Everyone present was stunned at once, and they all looked at Li Yuzhou and Sun Baolu strangely. They even dared to interrupt Ning Shangling's words in public. These 2 people were out of their minds. Were they tired of living? Who said no? How dare they make trouble in our West Island? Come on, drag them out. Ning Shangling didn't need to speak. Yan Xinlan, who was next to her, immediately ordered with a gloomy face, for disciples of West Island with towering momentum suddenly appeared around the two people. They were not ordinary guards. Disciples who could directly obey. Yen Xinlan, the deputy island owner, were the elites of West Island. At least they had the cultivation of the mysterious ascending period. With the strength of Li Yuzhou and Sun Baolu, they had no power to resist at all. The two people were so scared that they wet their pants on the spot. If they were really dragged out, they would be half disabled even if they didn't die. They hurriedly shouted, "Wait! Lin Yi has a big problem with his character. He doesn't deserve to be West Island's son-in-law." As soon as these words came out, all the people present were in an uproar. Lin Yi himself looked inexplicable. He squinted at Li Yuzhou and Sun Baolu, but he had no impression of these two guys. But when he saw them standing next to Ren Zhongyuan's group, he seemed to be thinking about something. Oh, Ning Shangling didn't feel offended. She stopped the four guards of West Island with a look, and then her eyes fell on the two people, signaling them to continue talking. It was related to Ning Xuefei's marriage, and there was no room for carelessness. Although Ning Shangling was quite satisfied with Lin Yi, if he really had a big problem with his character, as these two people said, then she had to reconsider. Although Ning Shangling's eyes were still calm and gentle at the moment, and other people present didn't feel anything strange, Li Yuzhou and Sun Baolu suddenly felt a lot of pressure. The majesty and overbearing hidden in her eyes couldn't be felt by outsiders. There was no pressure in her eyes, but the two people involuntarily knelt down. They couldn't help it. Their knees didn't listen to them. Chapter 47-43. But according to the rules passed down by the ancestors of West Island, if Lin Yi became Ning Xuefei's husband, he could only be with Ning Xuefei in name for the rest of his life, and couldn't have other women. After all, this was a society of women's rights. As the successor of West Island, Ning Xuefei naturally had to set an example for the people of West Island. However, rules were dead, but people were alive. Ning Shangling knew very well that if they clung to these rules, then West Island would never be able to recruit an extraordinary genius like Lin Yi. If they secluded themselves, they would only get weaker and weaker, and the gap between them and other Heaven Stage islands would get bigger and bigger. In the end, they could only sink into oblivion forever. In fact, Ning Shangling had a lot of ways to circumvent this so-called ancestral rule, but there was an important prerequisite. Before these things were properly handled, they couldn't be brought up in public and had to be done in private. But now, Li Yuzhou and Sun Baolu suddenly jumped out at this time and casually let everyone present see the photos. This immediately messed up Ning Shangling's plan, and it was hard to get off the tiger. And at this moment, Lu Ziyu's face was also very ugly. She could accept the relationship between Lin Yi and Hui Yudi in private, but to be exposed in public like this, that was a disgrace to the whole East Continent. Lu Ziyu suddenly flew into a rage out of humiliation. Although she secretly hated Hui Yudi for not having self-respect, she hated Li Yuzhou and Sun Baolu the most at this time, these two busybodies with ulterior motives. By doing this, not only did they disgrace her and East Continent, but more importantly, they damaged Hui Yudi's reputation, which was the most important thing for a girl. After noticing Lu Ziyu's fierce gaze, Li Yuzhou and Sun Baolu couldn't help but be frightened. He had already knelt down because of Ning Shangling's gaze. This time, he couldn't even kneel steadily. His whole body was almost lying on the ground. His whole body was trembling like a sieve, and he couldn't stop trembling. Even if Lu Ziyu couldn't kill them in public in this public place, don't forget that they were going back to East Continent on the treasure ship together. At that time, the Vice Dean of Morning Pride Academy could casually think of something. It could kill the two of them without making a sound. Only then did the two of them feel extremely regretful. They wished they could slap themselves until they fainted. F***CK. Why did they come up with such a stupid idea in a moment of hot-headedness? This was simply courting death. However, now that things had come to this, it was useless no matter how much they regretted it. Faced with the hostile gazes of Ning Shangling, Lu Ziyu, and Yen Xinlan, they could only brace themselves and continue speaking. In this West Island trial, everyone knew that it was related to the marriage of the Princess of West Island. However, Lin Yi did something improper with Hui Yudi in the trial. He clearly didn't put everyone in West Island in his eyes. Li Yuzhou hurriedly shifted his hatred. Yes, this kind of person is morally inferior. He doesn't even take such an important trial seriously. Instead, he impairs public morals and plays with other women in broad daylight. How can this kind of person entrust the Princess of West Island to him? Sun Baolu echoed. Those who were watching a good show didn't mind the matter getting bigger. The others also started to make a ruckus. Hui Yudi's face turned pale. When she heard that, she became anxious instantly. She broke away from Lu Ziyu's hand and was ready to stand up and tell the truth. However, Lin Yi stood up one step ahead of her. He didn't want Hui Yudi to clarify, although there was nothing between them. Even if Hui Yudi told the truth, he couldn't escape the fact that he was lying under her skirt to treat the poison. If it was spread out, it would still cause irreparable damage to her reputation. Is it interesting to say this? Can this photo be used as evidence against us? Lin Yi said slowly and calmly. Everyone was stunned when they heard that. When this happened, everyone thought that Lin Yi would fly into a rage out of shame, but they didn't expect this guy to act like nothing had happened. It seemed that this had nothing to do with him at all. Could it be that it was fake? Isn't this the evidence? Everyone has seen it. This is the real and irrefutable evidence. Do you still want to quibble? Li Yuzhou hurriedly insisted. Irrefutable evidence? You think a random photo can be used as irrefutable evidence? Ignorance isn't your fault, but treating us as fools like you is really not right. Lin Yi curled his lips disapprovingly. Ignorance? How are we ignorant? Li Yuzhou and Sun Baolu couldn't help but look at each other. The rest of the people revealed expressions of confusion. In any case, they didn't dare to join in the commotion at this time. Otherwise, they would really be treated as brainless fools. Wouldn't that make them clowns that would be laughed at by others? Seeing that Lin Yi had grasped the rhythm of everyone present with just a few sentences, and that a crisis that was about to get out of hand was actually so easily controlled by him, Ning Shangling, who had a gloomy expression, couldn't help but slightly curve up the corners of her mouth. It seems that Lin Yi is not only superior in strength, but he is also well-versed in the way of dealing with people. He is far from being comparable to other young people of the same generation. He is really extraordinary. I came from the secular world. The mobile phones and cameras in the secular world now have Photoshop functions. It is very simple to put two people together. How can this be used as evidence? How dare you take it out to fool people on such a solemn occasion where so many sages gather? Lin Yi sneered and looked at the two of them like he was looking at idiots. This kind of retarded trick can only fool some brainless people. If you want to fool me from the secular world, you are simply asking to be humiliated. Yeah, Big Bro Lin's right. If you two want to, Jing can even Photoshop the two of you together. Do whatever you want, whatever position you want, even if it's Photoshopped. You guys don't want it. Han Jingjing said in support of Lin Yi. Her words made everyone burst into laughter. Although they didn't understand some of the secular words, they were smart people with flexible brains. It didn't prevent them from understanding the meaning. At this time, the gazes that they looked at Li Yuzhou and Sun Baolu became evil. The two of them were so embarrassed that their old faces turned red. Do you have evidence to prove that this photo is real? Ning Shengling immediately asked. The answer was obvious. Li Yuzhou and Sun Baolu were genuine natives of Heaven Stage Island. It was already amazing that they could use a camera. They thought that a photo was irrefutable evidence. How could they have thought that there was such a thing? The two of them were completely illiterate in technology. If they could explain this clearly in public, pigs could fly in the sky. You're tuning into the Mystic Fist YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.